now. So the only thing is, let me connect to the call. But this is not running? Oh, it is running. Alright, let's do that. Alright, so Ben is also on the call. So basically what we discussed over the over email, let me just repeat this. So basically the idea was that we would discuss the awaiter and the awaiter APIs, but we decided not to do that because too many people are out and can't make it today, so instead we'll focus on pipelines more. And but before we do that, there's two issues that Asom needs to review to get unblocked. Do you have any preferences for order between the two? Or
this one will be first.
Right, then let's do that. That's a lot of APIs. We'll squeeze that in, like a lot of APIs. It's always great.
What module does this live in?
It lives in system memory.
Yeah. So
the point of this issue is essentially to get parity with all the array APIs that we have. These were the ones that between array and span. These are the ones that were missing. The ones that are commented out, I explicitly chose not to add them because there's different paradigms for span, like using slice instead of having index overloads.
Do we? I mean, I always feel like, do we really feel like we have scenarios for each of these? So, like, it's one thing to say we did this before, and therefore we want parity with it, and we just clone, right? But that assumes that somebody was using the previous ones, and do we know whether?
So the reason for this, so I think I filed the issue originally, maybe not, but basically what we did is we created span, and we told people it's like an array. And it's hit and miss whether you find the same APIs in both places. And we got like, oh, this API is missing. So we did the DCR, and Asom worked and added the API. 2 days later, oh, we're missing this API. And it kind of happened, 5 times. We are like, let's just review all the APIs on array and kind of make sure that, since we are communicating that the types are like modal equivalents, let's just have the same APIs.
Okay.
But I get your point.
Like reverse is a great example. I mean,
Which one?
Reverse. Like, do people really use reverse? I have no idea, but
We have data on it, by the way.
I believe it. So that's what I'm asking. I'm asking whether we think that they're important.
Emo, do you have access to
I
the statistics?
Let me just do this on the other side.
Anyway, I see that there's a value in consistency. Like, if it's on array, it's here. And so if we're saying that adding these things was trivial and it's like 3 lines of code because, the underlying things are all blah, 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 and this is just sort of for consistency.
I think the primary motivation might be one parity with arrays. Like the idea is that you get people to move off of arrays if they can help it.
Right.
And the more code they have to touch on, like the harder it gets, right? I mean, like.
Right.
I mean, some of them are probably not hard. It's just getting the boundary conditions right all the time is like it's just tedious and annoying. And, I think that's primarily why we care.
So two open issues regarding the actual APIs. One is find all, allocates an array. I propose an alternative that takes in a span as the result that would avoid allocations. That shape is open to change.
To be clear.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's a logical equivalent. It's not the exact same API.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had it change it to try find all because your input span could be too small. So it will return false if it's too small.
So one comment I would have, some of these methods like true for all, they seem like they are link methods that were added for an array because they could be implemented more efficiently.
I think there are 3 link methods, right? Before we got link.
Is true for all?
Some of them might be.
If you
Because we may run into additional problem, which is now that we add those, people notice that some link methods are available on span and some are not, and then we keep going, and now we have to add all link methods.
No, this is not link. This was done in Flutter Framework 2.0.
Since link age, we were using functs and actions instead of strongly typed predicates, so it was pre-link. It was there before we did all the work.
As I said, it's 2.0. So This is all
Does span implement INeverable?
No. Cannot implement interfaces.
So then here's your answer. If the link method requires INeverable, then
No, then we can implement a link-like method over span.
Or we can implement a wrapper that gives you an INeverable. You can have all the link stuff you want on span.
No. We cannot even do that, but fine.
I'm assuming the ones that are commented that they're not really part of it.
Because the ones that are commented out, they have a comment which is all of those ones you could slice the span first and then pass it to the ones that are not commented out.
And they're all overloads.
Yeah. So are we okay with the try find all signature instead of the find all which allocates?
So, I certainly think that the one that returns an array is a little wonky because you're doing spans, but you're not using spans where it would obviously be useful to use a span. So
it's one of those cases where I would omit it unless we have data that says find all is actually useful. I don't think it's that useful.
And also, what would user do? Where would user take a span? Like if you try to convert your method and then like you see that find all method is not there, and you see there is try find all. Like my first thought would be create new array and pass it into result span.
Well, speaking of link, right, with find all and true for all, those could both be replaced by an aggregate function that would allow you to allocate or not. No? Why not?
You cannot call aggregate.
No, you can't call it the actual aggregate function. I'm saying instead of having both of those two methods, you could define an aggregate function.
You could have a function that returns INeverable, correct?
It'll allocate.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
we cannot make it work.
Not allocating, you can't make it work, but allocating, if you want to play with it, you can.
Yeah.
Things.
Also, you'll have to turn like try find all calls into a loop that knows how to expand resulting span. So just for parity, I would keep the array returning method because people would make some mistake while.
But that's what Vance was saying. Like you're in the span world, and now we force you into an array world, and we copy. On the other hand, the try find all doesn't have enough parameters because you don't know how many t's were written to the result.
Size of the result. Oh,
pre-size result
in the successful case.
But more even after. Let's assume you fix that. There's a concern with I have here, which is this is the are people going to use it? If we built it, would someone use it? You know what I mean? Like
people use everything we build. API.
So
did
we? User community, or was it like somebody who implements every API? Because what I'm concerned about is that if you create something where using it is so stilted or not obvious or whatever, no one's going to use it. They're just going to write. All of these things can be implemented in probably less than 5 lines of code.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a pretty good chance that if it isn't sort of in their face and easy to use just like that, if it isn't like 1 line of code, it isn't worth it. They're just going to write the 5 lines of code and be done with it. So anyway, I'm not convinced this one passes that test.
Let me just change it for now.
So in addition, I think the find all we could remove, and the true for all.
Assuming both variations of it.
And the true for all. The true for all bothers me actually the most.
Why?
Because it's basically link.
It is, but.
So all the others make it pretty good.
Well, in addition, there are like few hundred link methods on enumerable, and people will now ask for the others as well. That's my worry.
Except these ones are specifically on array, right?
Yeah.
Accident of history.
But it's a goal to convert people
So again,
Convert people
who are currently using array.
To span. I don't think we. So Imo said that we are trying to encourage people to move from array to span. I don't think that's the goal.
Okay.
I think the goal should be for this feature should be if somebody wants to convert, they shouldn't be running into roadblocks. They're like, oh, I was using array and I had exists and now I cannot find exists. So it's not about pushing people in this direction. It's about
I will tell you, I didn't know true for all existed. So it's possible that it's possible that its use is pretty small. In which case, I mean, like I look at reverse there too. I'm like,
Yes.
So reverse true for all. Find all has problems. Yeah.
So I use reversed.
Okay.
Reverse. I
Okay.
implemented a hex formatter, and you basically divide by, modulo by 10, and then you end up with
Did you use it twice?
with a thing in the wrong order, and then you just call reverse it.
I know. Have you ever used it twice?
Same with the integer.
Okay, there's one you
I
said.
implemented this formatting for hex numbers many times. So.
Did you use it for anything else besides?
Yeah, the same would apply for like int parser. Like
Yeah. I mean, the digits going backwards. I get that one. Is there something else?
You ask two people to do this work.
Same redundant answer. Anyway,
So looking at usage data, reverse is really popular.
is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Funny enough, though, not the generic versions, but that's a different story.
Anyway, I guess
What about true for all?
7 lines of code. I really don't care.
By the way, not a link method. Link doesn't have a method like that. They have true, they have all, and they have any. They don't have true for all. This is like literally like the.
What does even true for all do?
Well, does the predicate
Emo, it's not any. They don't have a direct method, but they have it. It's not any, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's any and it's all.
It's all.
Two methods that they have a link.
Oh, so I see. Okay.
So it'd be all.
It's all. It's all.
Yeah.
It's all. They don't have that method, but they do have it.
Yeah, they don't, yeah. Well,
Not
yeah.
these semantics.
They have the semantics, but it's not a method that shows up from link essentially. I mean, the question is I don't know. To me, I'm fine with saying we don't want link-like methods, but I would say that holds up for anything that takes a predicate. I don't think true for all to me is not substantially different from, let's say, find last. I mean, it's the same logical thing. You pass a predicate and give back a result whether you found it or not.
I think we should do everything that's very simple, and then things that you have to think about to re-implement, just drop them.
So which ones are it?
All except find all or try find all.
These all seem
They're all kind of helper methods.
Find last. I don't know. I'm
Thinking
Like only find all is the one that you have to know what to do with it.
You
to
lose some
use
symmetry
correctly.
with find all because you can't get the indices for what you found, where for the other find ones you can, but who knows how much that matters.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, I don't know, to me, do we like the predicate ones? What's the performance going to be when you call those guys? How good are we with inlining? How good are we, do you get any benefits over those? No. Well, it's just making things worse, right?
It's help. I think these are convenience.
I think it would make it worse.
So this is a question of whether...
Yeah, imagine you call the method versus the naive for loop.
Yeah, that's what I think it's implemented as, the naive for loop, and therefore it's just saving you, you go from 5 lines of code down to 1 line of code or whatever. That is...
No, I get that. I'm saying, what's the performance?
It becomes slower.
It's probably becoming substantially slower because we do a delegate invocation basically every single time we loop, right?
I see.
Because the other one is just, whatever logic you have, that runs in line.
Yeah.
Hopefully is...
Well, it's worse than predicate invocation. If you just find index of some value, we use SIMD to implement it. It's vectorized. This one, forget about the delegate. It's not vectorized. It cannot be. There's no vector intrinsic that takes a delegate in the processor.
What?
Yeah, slackers. Who designs those?
It's probably a Spectre fix for that.
So are these blocking, or is this just clean up and...
It's just to clean up and get the parity so that these convenience APIs, like Christoph was saying, so that anyone who wants to use span...
To me, the value of this is that we don't have niggly little things coming in. Yeah. And so now we just have to decide... it also seems like we're already on a course where we're not going to be completely consistent. We're going to drop at least one of them.
By the way, outcome of the review, if the outcome of the review is we did the exercise to see what we are still missing, and we don't think that any of these actually, I'm completely fine with it. The main thing I wanted to do is avoid the yet another one, but I think maybe we ended up with, through the yet another one, we added all the ones that make sense, and now all that is remaining is nothing.
So that may be reverse, but
what? That's the one you picked?
My favorite one's not on the list.
Well, interestingly, reverse is the only one that doesn't take a predicate in this list, which seems like
at least link-like.
And Emo is saying that it's very heavily used, therefore. Then 4.
And like from all the methods I use when I do data manipulation, reverse is pretty high on that list.
Really? What do you use it for? What do people use
So
it
like
for?
for
People
example,
on this side of the table use reverse.
so I can give you an example. Like when you do tree traversals, it's very popular because basically when you do tree traversals and you have stacks and other things, you sometimes get
Fine.
in the wrong order. And, like thing is like I don't know like.
Okay, fine. That's
For
enough for
span-
me. That's enough. You
for
did.
span,
There were 2 examples. That was enough.
But I would say this one, given the goals we have with span, which is this performance type, given that nobody asked for these methods yet,
Yeah.
I would just say, and given that you could probably make an argument and say they look like perf traps because we advertise them, and it's like really you shouldn't call them. It's like
Right.
it seems like a bad combo. Versus reverse, I mean, like we can
Reverse
the shit out of this thing, right? Like that's super fast, but we
We started this review sessions with reverses. Why are we adding reverses? That's the thing.
I was willing to concede that point if someone would just tell me that someone uses it. It seems we have data that suggests that people are using it, so.
Ben brings up sort.
Yeah, do we have any sorting?
Sort API, there's already an issue.
Okay.
Already there, I see.
Already approved.
What about for each? That's my favorite array list.
Yes, I think that seems.
For each overspan, it's already implemented, correct?
It's
For each method.
Oh, this method that takes an action.
Oh, this one, yes.
I hate that.
Arrays is not too bad. List is really bad.
So, are we leaning towards just adding reverse or doing nothing? Either of those are fine with me.
Yeah, I would say I would just add reverse and call it a day. When somebody asks for
Anyone
them,
So,
yeah.
Wes, you wanted to add something?
no, I was just asking why I didn't put for each on the list.
Are you trying to be helpful or not? We had someone who's sort of we had at least the theoretical person who would use it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, I could imagine someone
We
using
real
it.
people and not doing
Well, no. That's
But you want to
as long as
we are real.
the people who used it believe that their scenario they would imagine spanifying. Like you could imagine that it would have whatever they did, I would like to do it with span because span is better, you know, for efficiency or whatever. If that's true, then I'm okay with it.
I think I used it in public.
You're on this side of the table.
calculation.
Get on the other side, man.
Gotta move now.
all right. Let me just mark the API now. Second one.
Update the API shape in the comment, which is linked.
Sorry, which one?
It's a link to the main post.
Ooh. Oh, you're cheating. You're saying, oh, this looks really easy. And then you click on this, like, whoa.
A lot of them are overloads or similar stuff.
That's what they call it later.
This is similar in the sense that instead of arrays, this is now string parity with ReadOnlySpan of chars. Most, as Steven mentioned, some of them that were that he wanted to add. I added the rest that were in the list that you consistent.
So you went over all the methods that string has and basically created the read-only-span of char equivalent of them?
Yeah, except for some like concat or join,
And-
which didn't make sense.
And these are the new ones, the ones that aren't already there.
Right.
And do we have a feel for how many are already there? Like how many?
We have index of on T, ReadOnlySpan of T and stuff. So sequence equal, sequence compared.
But were there any read-only-span of char methods
Specific to char, no.
that were okay before?
But we have generic ones which you can use ReadOnlySpan of char for.
So the only question would be, would it be useful to, instead of putting all memory extensions, or just define, it wouldn't call it string extensions, but differently? Just for understanding, like
the class name.
Yeah, because I mean, like I think read-only-span of char is not the same thing logically as, you know, read-only bytes, for example, because like they have like very different like shapes usually, and like this is all like string-like functionality that we wouldn't have anywhere else.
But do people care? Because these methods would not show up. If you have a span of anything but chars, they would just not show up on the
No, I agree with that, but I'm saying, like, imagine the scenario where you want to browse the docs and understand this thing. Now you have one single type with like 400 extension methods, right?
Yeah, the type would be like link, or like you know, enumerable class.
Which is one way to saying
it's docs and you don't look at
no, it's like it keeps like I keep clicking the button.
Do we? So I'm trying to understand because I thought our like UTF-8 encoded stuff. And this doesn't feel UTF-8 encoded?
No,
right?
no, but we have. I mean, people have UTF-16 string.
I know, but now the question is, you know, you put stuff like this in. That's because you want them to use it. Like that's the way to do strings or whatever, right? So that would make perfect sense if we said the way to do strings is spans of char. But it's not. Like our idea, I thought, was UTF-8.
I think UTF-8 is only if you're like in a context of the network. Like we're never gonna be able to.
I get it.
Like.
So the question is how often will that's a halfway point. So clearly, you know, you might be in the old world with normal string and so forth. You know, you might be in the span world, but I would have expected you would have been UTF-8, but maybe I'm wrong. That's the part.
The moment you call, like you want to efficiently slice our existing UTF-16 string, you end up with a span, and then you want to trim and you want to compare it and make it to lower, and suddenly you don't have APIs.
Are we set on all of these extensions being specific to characters? Because like trim and stuff, I could see making sense as generic.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of these can be generic.
I was thinking that, and I thought, you know,
remove.
That's
like
a
most
real
of
big
it,
feature.
really.
That's a really big feature.
Well, it feels
From
like
the-
it'll
from
make
the
it
outs-
harder to use for its like bread and butter purpose. Like now you're going to have extra parameters for like what's the trim character or whatever.
But you still have them, right?
Well, because it's either, you still have those trim character parameters, and you can just make it default for when it's left out if you want.
You just don't do without it for T. You do overload without trim character only for char and everything else for T.
Yeah, I guess you probably wouldn't want to make it default because that would never meet
Oh,
space.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Space, but
Like some of them make sense for T.
Trim
Yeah.
and trim start would be sweet to have.
The one that takes parameters, not
Yeah,
the one.
yeah, the one that
yeah,
takes
we agree. Yeah, the parameterized one.
So, yeah, I don't feel strongly either way. On the other hand, I have a question related. Maybe we can, while we think.
So I didn't quite get the feedback one. Like, what will be used?
Second, third.
Actually, I don't know. Would you actually use it?
Instead of being.
I was thinking it was.
generic.
It would be cool, and now I'm thinking, when would you actually have something else that wasn't a
Oh, instead of char, basically.
Char.
That wasn't text, basically.
that wasn't a char that you would trim if it was at the end?
Well,
Null?
one thing I can think of is like
Have a null?
UTF-8.
What?
Get rid of zeros or null.
Sometimes I might.
I have a null. though.
So
Like if it's
this
a
is going to
byte
be struct,
representing
isn't it?
Like a
an ASCII character or something.
So, as a point of philosophy, I will say that having been at Microsoft for more than a decade, we are much, much more likely to over-design things than to under-design them. So we tend to want to generalize everything and make it, add a bunch of bells and whistles until it's so complicated that our users have no idea what to do with it. So I think we're doing it here, for what it's
You mean
worth.
doing it if we change it to generic?
If
or
we're
doing it right
trying
now?
to generalize this to the general case of, well, can we trim things that aren't characters? And all I'm saying is that we do this at Microsoft a lot. I'm not necessarily saying this is the wrong time to do it, but I'm saying that we tend to do it, and so we should be suspicious of
You
it.
convince me.
Well, speaking specifically to this point, I think you would be more likely, from our consumption of it, to use these extension methods if at least they were available on Byte. Just because you're dealing with ASCII characters.
Yes, agreed.
It's the same thing that.
I agree that Byte is probably the most likely place that you'll use it.
So I have on a related note about the trim. The span that is returned, is it you make a data copy or it's the same span?
It could be the same span. We could just slice it.
Well, it could be, but what are we gonna do?
I assume you do.
Yeah, you
Well,
have,
there's no need to
wouldn't
allocate. Yeah.
But it's important because one is alias.
Important that it's
not.
not visible in the API.
It's true.
Well, why is it visible?
Because you don't know. And so basically you pass a span, you get now the new value. If you use our string APIs, you get a new string, so you can do whatever you want with the...
You're on the stack, it doesn't matter too much.
I think we should
As soon as your stack pop, you are not... Like, GC isn't a problem.
It's not about GC, it's about... what if I now mutate the span that I passed in? Does it affect the result that I get back?
And I would argue that you should spec it as being a subspan.
So we can either spec it, and then we have kind of clean API that looks like the string APIs, or we could take the span by ref, which makes it kind of clearer. Yeah, but then API
harder to use.
Why does it make it clear? You just override the variable. You still don't make a statement about the buffer that it points to.
Yeah.
Still,
kind of. It makes it clearer. Like that doesn't make it clear. It makes it clearer.
As consumer of this API, I would expect it to slice.
Yes.
Like this is high performance span-based API. Why would you ever copy things around?
Actually, I have concern about those which do allocate new stuff.
Yeah.
I may start with a string which is not really a string. I mean, the span points to like data in the shared memory, whatever. I call the method and it allocates a completely new string on the GC heap, which I now point to something else.
I think
I need to return the buffer which I'm renting, and it's just this.
But do any of them allocate?
Yeah, there's some that would like remove and replace. I added alternatives, but that could
certainly replace makes sense. But I think as long as they're explicitly documented, whenever you should you should probably be explicit about it all the time. But you could be, the assumption is that you don't allocate unless explicitly.
I don't see how replace allocates. A replace cannot allocate, given this signature.
If the amount you replace with is larger than what you're replacing, you are forced to allocate.
No, you cannot allocate. The caller allocates. That's what you mean?
If you replace multiple characters.
The non-allocating alternative that I provided,
Do we have a allocating one?
Yeah, the first one. That's the one that is...
Oh, yeah.
I makes up a new buffer and then points.
I mean, that's a read-only thing. You have to allocate anytime you want to.
Yeah, this one we
probably don't.
Probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, because you lose allocated value immediately. Like.
Yeah, we should.
Like you get span and you cannot even put it, like store it anywhere.
So you're saying that would apply to all the ones that we reallocate, like remove.
What's our expectation? Like when we call this guy, you guess and pass in a buffer, and then what happens?
So in general, all our APIs that have this pattern, they are try. So it should be try. And then they have to return an additional parameter that says how long is actual result.
So it's the double. It's the try, and if it's too small, reallocate.
But it's such a pervasive pattern in our APIs, and it's actually not difficult to call. Like you basically call if try blah and done, then I slice whatever the thing returned.
Okay.
And if not, then I enlarge the buffer and do it again.
But then,
so we're saying you don't want this. I kind of agree with that. And then this one should be called try.
And add out in parameter.
And an out.
I wouldn't
should follow that pattern. Is that pattern always followed? Like there's a ref int. Okay.
I think it's a bad pattern with replace. For replace, you can count amount of things you need. You can pre-calculate size of the new span you need.
Not always. Not if you don't know the number of.
I mean,
you don't know how many of them.
You should have to go through the
you
whole thing.
implement it. Like, so why force people? How many times would you resize your span to get it to
follow the pattern?
So the pattern is to randomly resize it until it finally fits.
No. That's the caller who gets to decide whether you randomly.
They can first measure and then they just.
And then what's the point if they can measure?
Because sometimes you don't want to measure. If your old value is very large.
That's when you want to measure. So you don't keep expanding buffer until the new value fits.
I don't understand.
And does replace work in place like the non-allocating version? Like, is that something that we support for when the new value is smaller, of course, or the same size?
So why does replace have this old value?
I would expect you need three things.
Yeah, you need three.
It's bind and replace. Yeah.
So
Don't you need the value you're operating on? The
This
two,
is one of the arguments, right?
So,
Oh, this is extension method.
Yeah. So you need this span, and then this span old, or then this span, then span old value, then read-only span new
it
value.
should be this span source, old value, new value.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I think Ian has a very good point, which is, if we shrink, we should have a method that does the same thing in place. We need to have two methods. If the replacement is expanding, you need to pass a new buffer. If it's not, then it is in place.
I see. And the user needs to know beforehand if it's changing.
Or we do the trick that we have in some other APIs that, we have in our transformers, you pass a larger buffer. You tell it how much data it has, and it expands to the slack.
What happens if your source and destination overlap?
We know that. We have a check implemented by a community member.
I mean, you will do
that check.
You will do the right thing if it's possible.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea that API shapes change based upon whether the parameters are bigger or smaller than the input buffer, things like that. So your other idea where you pass in a buffer and it might have an overage and you can expand into it, that one, at least the shape didn't change.
Okay.
The other one feels like so painful to use properly that really, is it worth having a thing that does that generically?
I would be okay with only the pattern with the slack, but I think for this API, you often know what you're passing in. Because you're like, I want to remove, replace all.
You often know the literals.
New line,
right.
Carriage return,
just character return.
like just carriage return or something like this.
In fact, I think it very rarely called replace with not literal.
Right, exactly.
So, sorry, I was reading Ben Adams' post. You're talking about the need for a replace that takes like a single T or car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
And the same is true with 2-upper, right?
But there is a remove, which is.
Remove upper should have an in-place version. Or 2-upper.
Yeah, so, you say that, but that doesn't hold up when you keep culture into account.
So 2-upper don't actually allocate data.
Well, culture, yeah.
Also, one of the most common uses of these are probably going to be to slice strings, right? In which case you can't modify the buffer because you'd be modifying the string, right? Am I insane there? Or?
The 2-upper to lower?
But you were pointing out that, I could see the scenario. You start out with strings, and then you slice them to get substrings, and now you want to do some more operations on them to do more stuff. But under those circumstances, you can't do any in place. In fact, it's kind of
No, it's not a problem because there are read-only spans and there are spans here. The read-only spans cannot be mutated in place.
But basically, what he's saying is that would mean we would have to have different versions, in place and non-in place versions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to have a span version that's
a read-only span. And it's that.
And they should have different names because one that.
So I think that we could have, but the other alternative is if you have a read-only span and you want to do a mutation, you have to make a copy before you call, and then you call an in-place API.
Right.
It's equivalent. There's no difference. It's just somebody needs to think how to do it, as opposed to they just have an API and it takes the right.
It just means that if you start with strings, the API can get inconvenient.
They are not that inconvenient. If you start with string and you slice, you get read-only span, so you cannot pass it to in-place API, and you can call to array. It gives you an array of chars, and you can pass it to now in-place APIs. If you know how to do it, it's convenient. But
And it's better to do it outside. At least you can copy into the stack allocated span if you are in the caller space. If we don't do it for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll have to allocate on heap.
So for the things that do allocate, should they be returning a read-only span or just a span?
Things that do allocate, they should give you
a span.
Bonus.
But I would say we should.
The ones that do allocate, we won't have them. It would be the alternative that we would keep.
Well, for things like 2-upper, right? If you want it to read-only span, you must allocate, right? Like that's the point.
Oh, but he's saying you'll have a result instead.
Oh, okay.
But
I
the
see.
2-upper ones, they don't need to allocate because the size doesn't change.
But we don't want them to mutate.
It's
So
not.
it has to make a new one.
Yeah.
And they take read-only-span, so you cannot mutate it.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, we would do the.
You could have the result.
Right.
You don't know what to allocate.
Yeah.
Either a string or array of char.
Yeah, actually, none of these APIs can actually mutate in place. They all take read-only spans, as far as I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Okay, so meaning they all allocate,
or they
which means they should be
slicing.
redesigned.
So, but these are okay. Like the trims and the equals and the compares are okay.
Yeah. So what about that email?
Starts with this fine, so ends with.
Saying what
It ends with is
We-
white.
We approve the trim APIs. They don't mutate.
Are we approve them being specifically for character?
We approve them specifically for character to avoid the issue that Vance was talking about.
What about
Could we do
us?
character
What
and
about
byte?
Kestrel?
Uh,
We have ASCII characters in headers.
bytes.
We want to trim them.
and you want to trim basically specifically by passing some values.
Yeah. I mean, I would prefer T. I would take byte.
But if you put it on byte, it's as good as T.
I'm sorry, it's as good as what?
As put it on T.
Oh.
Like byte
So
is.
and char.
I think if we're going to do byte and char, it makes more sense to just do T.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Well, once you have T, you have to compare.
No, they don't have a.
How do you compare?
Well, it has
No,
to be
no.
like I equatable. Right?
Only trims.
We already have APIs that take T and are constrained to I equatable. And then we do generic specializations over byte. We actually don't call.
I think these are.
Okay, next time we really want to trim byte array, we'll ask you again.
I mean, it's code you
Well,
can write yourself, like to the other.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Sure. We will do for
They will
both.
not conflict.
But
There
I
are-
would, I would
there-
prefer it in these.
Like trim can be simplified pretty good. Like match entire blocks of.
So why don't we do that?
Not overloads.
It's true, but I mean, like, how much do you trim anyway?
And
Do you,
the-
so you have a lot of
the-
data that
throws away the
trims?
rest.
Because I mean, most of the time it's like
Or like
one
two
or- one or
places
two,
in
yeah.
Kestrel, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm suspicious that, like, a bunch of these are the ones you use when you're just trying to slap something together and you're not worried about efficiency a whole lot.
Yeah, it's good for prototyping at that.
Then we have a
it's actually a good point. I mean, like
There are
almost.
things like 2-upper.
I mean, do any of them in batches? You should use StringBuilder.
And there are some that take like the string compare and it don't make any sense. But I think something generic like trim or
It's not
remove
so clear that because span it, especially the ones that you have to pass in the return buffer, then are sort of more painful to actually like write the code to use them.
So we were supposed to box this. So what about this? We do just the trims for now. And since now we have a scenario, so maybe we do over T and we do the specialization for char and byte, how we did in the past.
Other good
We have
methods.
no specializations at CAR today. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, so these are new. So that the thing I worry about sort of doing this half idea that you're describing. Oh, we'll do the first three because they don't seem controversial. It's an interesting question of whether the whole thing, either we have some scenarios where you use care and yes, I need these things and I can imagine doing this, or we don't. And so doing half of them doesn't sort of get you this.
Well, no, we will do the rest. The point is that the rest needs to be redesigned. We just realized that the APIs we need to be redesigned because they cannot literally mutate the thing in.
No, I get it. Yeah, it can't be approved as is because it's wrong.
Yeah.
And once you allocate, you need to make sure that you are.
So why don't we just boot it until we get the next round?
Yeah, I think we should probably spend some time like thinking about what the policy should be, and then try to make it somewhat consistent so we don't end up with like 5 flavors doing the same thing.
I would love to see a little bit of a sample use case. Like here is what I consider the poster child use of these APIs. You don't have to use them all. You don't have to just have to get the flavor of of like this is why it would be handy, really useful.
Tim Seward says the finance world runs on trim APIs.
So, Asan, are you blocked on this?
No, I can. I mean, there's a lot of feedback here that
Okay.
go and redesign and
Okay.
APIs.
I think currently we have distinction. We have arrays and we have strings, which are sort of arrays. String have the very rich API. Arrays, they basically don't have much of an API. So that's why we cannot decide what goes.
But part of the reason why you have a richer API is because it is more specific.
It's also a concrete type.
It's a but you have a much better idea what the scenarios are, and you also don't have this much problem where, with arrays and other things, you have to tell the equatable or whatever. You have these other things, whereas all that is well defined by the time you get the string. It's char, it's equals. It's it's very very straightforward.
Except for the string comparison options.
Yeah. Yeah. And aren't they a pain? Oh shit! Case independent. Damn.
So regarding the extension class name, we have some methods that are like index of, they're generic, they're on T. If we have separate class name for like string APIs, then we would have some ReadOnlySpan char APIs like index of, they will live in memory extensions, and the others will live in string extensions. Cause more confusion. Because you go look at the string extensions and you don't have an index of for that takes ReadOnlySpan of char. Unless we specialize.
But it'd show up in IntelliSense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
also we don't have any span APIs on string extensions, right?
No, but you mentioned that we could have another class. That's not called memory extension. That's called some like.
Emo was suggesting
Oh,
that, yeah.
okay. Emo was suggesting it. What was I suggesting?
Splitting memory extension into like memory extension A and memory extension B.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and string extension.
That's a whole different thing. Okay. First, we should look at
Don't worry about that yet.
And shuffle the type.
It's relatively minor, right?
Yeah, it's just you change the type name, right? Like, at least in the API. Until you break the world, man. Alright, so then that's the other thing. So last time where did we end? We basically looked at read-only bytes.
Read-only buffer.
And no, we're talking about the rest of the pipe, like the actual pipelines thing that does.
You can go to the next slide, please, and then we'll get back to the next one.
Okay.
Oh shit! I didn't send you updated version.
Can we just
take over
okay,
projection?
It's fine. No, I'll just go to the first one.
Just fix it on the.
No, it's fine.
That'll work over the web view.
So pipelines. Last time we've seen basically what are they for, and you need them to manage multi-segmented buffers between a single producer and a single consumer that consumes them. And we found useful in Kestrel, and we think like a lot of networky I/O scenarios would need them too. So this pipe is backed by memory pool. It supports a feature called back pressure when you can when total length of data in pipe goes over that size.
To be clear, that's not up here, the maximum. I don't see it. Am I missing
It's
it?
on the next slide.
Okay.
It's on the options class.
Okay.
I had to split them into. Yeah, so when the total size of the pipe goes over the value, the flush method that transfers data from writer to reader, it's async method, but it's like blocks. So you can prevent overwriting and taking too much memory. And this is important because in Stream, for example, is the pull API. So you ask Stream to read data. So you can only ask it to read when you are ready to get it. But pipe is push-pull. So writer tries to pull data, to push data on you, and you pull data out. So you have to have some limiting mechanism that will prevent fast writers and slow readers from eating your entire memory. Then we have a mechanism for completion notification. So you can see that both iPipe reader and pipe writer has complete with exception.
Should we maybe look at the sample code first and then go to special cases later? Because I think maybe easier from a flow standpoint to understand how you get data out or get data in first.
Yeah, sure.
And that maybe easier.
I have a general question though. we have an async API, and then we talk about blocking. Like
He doesn't
waiting.
mean actually blocking.
It's not blocking. It's just.
Okay, good.
Also,
It means incomplete
I would
test.
suggest we start with writing, because I think the mental model people have is there's a pipe, and somebody first writes to the pipe, and then somebody reads on the other hand. So I would start with the writing scenario.
Pipe variable is of type pipe. It has writer. You ask writer for the memory. You somehow put bytes into the memory. You tell writer how much you wrote, and then you call flush async. That would transfer ownership of these bytes you wrote from writer to reader. And if back pressure kicks in, you would have to await until it releases. If you have some completion condition, like you are reading from the stream and writing to the pipe, and stream returns 0 bytes read, you say pipe.writer.complete, and this would notify the reader that there wouldn't be no new data, and the reader, after reading whatever it's seen, can just exit.
How does advance vary from flush? What's the difference between the two?
So advance just tells, because you get memory doesn't know how much was written and how much of that is like good data. So advance just moves the pointer inside the memory to the point where you fill the data with.
So the reader can then do something.
Yeah, so the reader.
Well, that doesn't affect the reader yet, right? Like that just affects the next write.
It just lets the pipe know how much data it has inside itself. Because you can, when you call get memory, it will give you like 4K. Then you pass it to the stream, and stream reads 25 characters. So you have to tell it, okay, I fill 25 characters only. So the next time you call get memory, it will give you the rest of the
So you can call get memory in advance multiple times without calling flush. Until you call flush, the reader doesn't see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also when I call get memory, right, I get like in the first time I get the 4K buffer, right? Then I call advance. The next time I call get memory, I get whatever I advanced the last time. You already do the slicing for me, right?
Yeah. And get memory takes minimum size. So if you want more than there is, like by default it passes 0. So if there is nothing in the pipe, it will give you full new segment. If there is a tail space in the segment, like if there is something left free in the segment, it will give you that. But if you pass 2056 bytes, even if there is tail space, it will allocate new segment to give you exactly at minimum what you asked.
And then you can if you don't call flush, which will hit the back pressure.
No back pressure.
No back pressure until flush. That's
so basically you can if you
can
if you don't ever await flush.
If your writer is not well behaved, you will.
So get memory. You keep asking for the next chunk, and it just keeps making the buffer bigger. Is that
Get memory either returns a new chunk or returns the old one if it was not yet advanced fully.
It doesn't
have they're all the same size underneath all the pieces of memory. We give you a different projection depending on whether we're trying to get you the tail space.
Yeah, and it doesn't have any newness concept. It just has a concept of minimum size. If it has minimum size that you requested, it'll give it to you. It has optional argument.
When I say get memory, I guess
optional argument with the minimum size. Yeah.
There's a maximum size that is supported.
If it's bigger than 4K, you don't care.
It depends on the pool. So pipe is backed by the pool abstraction. So if your pool is able to give you, like what you ask from the pipe will ask from the pool. Right. If pool can satisfy your request, all good. If not, no luck. Exception, yeah.
So doing the advance is sort of analogous to giving offset to get memory, right? It's just the pipe get writer is keeping track of your offset internally?
Yeah.
It's offset to the end of what you wrote is basically.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only that. It also affects flush.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
we will give too much to this.
An offset that you pass to memory, it would work for your write, and then flush wouldn't know how much you written still.
Yeah, sure.
And you can also complete with the exception. If there is a case where you want to when failed writer fails the reader, like if you don't care about data if writer failed, you can transfer exception you can put exception into complete call, and then read async will just throw it out of the reader. So it's nice for cases where
But complete is optional, correct? So I could remove this whole
and it will work.
thing, just exit the loop. As long as I flash at the end, I'm good, except the reader will not know that.
You would just have to not.
The reader would be stuck.
How else? The pipe would die itself. Is you're saying? The
reader
says that I'm done for good. I'm never going to write again.
So the reader, you can it basically communicates to the reader that there's no reason for the reader to keep waiting anymore.
Right.
Otherwise, the reader would just be waiting.
Right. It's completely reasonable to have it. So do things get to the reader? There's no possibility for anything to get to the reader until flush is called?
There is a possibility. There is a method called commit, and it's synchronous, but it won't. Back pressure is not supported on that method, so you're on your own. Like if you commit.
If I ignore that, that seems to be for a different scenario or something.
We're debating the utility of that.
Yeah. Flush is sort of like give it to the writer or reader.
Yeah.
So,
and commit will give it to the reader too.
Okay.
And why do we have commit?
So there are some cases, for example, when you write a lot and reader, there is a synchronous read call on the reader, try read. So if you write a lot and reader is a bit slower, it can catch up to you synchronously without having to to do async callback and go through all the async thing. You just try read, like with the channels. You had read async and try, or whatever the name of the method was. But
commit is it's basic. So it's flush async without the triggering of an awaiting caller or awaiting reader. So
you can continue reading without going into async and without back pressure. It doesn't matter to back pressure, but without back pressure on this side, on the writer side.
So you're saying that there's sort of behavior semantics associated with flush async that doesn't happen with it's sort of a later thing.
So why don't we call it flush instead of commit?
Because of the absence of.
It doesn't trigger an awaiting reader for one. So if someone called flush and it didn't trigger an awaiting reader, that would be weird.
So commit, you can only read data.
Non-blocking read. So the data's there, but you're not pushed to do it. On flush, I do have sort of not issue, but there should be a flush that at the moment, since there is only flush async and it takes no parameters, it is it's sort of like a force flush. It means that the reader has to, if it's consuming the data, it has to sort of flush it. The data has to be flushed. Whereas there should be a sort of a notify flush where it's sort of optional that it flushes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're just
because basically, if the reader is going back out on the network, you're saying flush. It doesn't know whether there's going to be more data coming soon, so it's going to immediately write it out to the network. It's like it can't buffer it for a bit to sort of cut down on syscalls.
So today with advance, you can repeatedly call advance and not flush if you wanted to ensure that the reader received big chunks, and that was your only concern. But there's this weird in-between performance concern where it's like, well, if you're going to grab data anyway, reader, we'll give you all of it. Right. But if you're awaiting, we're just going to wait until this next chunky thing finishes. That's the purpose. It's pretty nuanced.
It's not that nuanced. For instance, TLS sends 16K frames, and there's a huge overhead per frame. And if you're writing out 100 or 200K from, say, Protobus, so this is something I've done with Mark, and he decides, well, I don't want to wait until I've written the whole 100K because there's a huge latency to that. So I'm going to flush at 40K. Well, that means that now the TLS layer has to write 3 frames, even though the last one is a partial frame, because it doesn't know if there's more data coming or not, so it has to write out that partial frame. Whereas if I knew there's more data coming, I can actually say, well, I'm going to hold off writing this partial frame because there's not a full 16K. So it's a real simple if statement. Basically, if some flag comes through that says this is the end of the message, then I have to write, or if I have more than a frame size, then I have to write. Otherwise, I'm just going to loop back around and wait, and not cause like a network call or a full frame. So it's basically like an application level Naggle in a way. Like I'm going to wait for the next full frame, but instead of like Naggle where it's like there's a timeout for it, I actually understand what the upper layer is doing. Whereas at the moment, there's no way to communicate that to a lower layer.
Right. Without commit, the only option you would have is calling advance a lot, and then only calling flush when you're done with like your.
No, so that's not what I at least. That's not what I proposed. What I'm proposing is just a rename.
Yeah.
Rename commit to flush.
Flush and then flush all levels or something, you know, that's super flush.
But you do understand that this API, if you have a reader in the middle of read async and you call what you're proposing renaming flush or commit to flush, the reader will not, that call to read async will not finish. So it doesn't feel like a flush to me.
No, so there's three things.
I read, yes, that will succeed.
Hold on, let's hear what Ben and Co are trying to say.
Yeah, there's three things. There's commit, which is I'm making the data visible to the other side. So if it happens to be running in parallel, it can opportunistically pick it up. Then there's a sort of a partial flush, which is notify, post commit, notify the other person, but they don't have to. I've got more data to process, so they don't have to throw it out onto the network. And then there's like a full flush, which is notify the reader, but I don't have any more
we know that
input data to continue processing, so flush it now.
So we don't have a middle feature right now. We have only get.
For me, the
like you cut out a bit.
So like sorry, the obvious place is to have another parameter of flush async. So it's flush async, and it's like is partial or is completed or.
Can't you communicate this via side channel, like via variable, if you have more data? If you can pass it as a parameter, you can just drop it into a variable and communicate it.
Yeah, side channels are like impossible to synchronize, though.
I agree. I feel like if it's natural to need it, then we should probably support it. But I also think that as long as we could add it in version 2, I feel like you were doing something insane, that maybe we can just table it, make sure that we really believe that we need it.
We cut down the API surface to
I see how we need to. I see how we need commit and flush. I see that. I don't. And there seems to be a question whether there's a third one. That one is not so clear, and I have some people who live this stuff saying it's not so clear. So
I'm still not convinced that we need not only not convinced. I think it's kind of, unless I misunderstand the semantics, it's kind of a trap, because if I use the wrong APIs on the other side and I call commit, won't the user be surprised? Like, I just committed these bytes and they don't show up.
Commit means I wrote the bytes, but I don't have any need necessarily to read them yet. And then the flush says, I really, really want the reader to see them.
Our tutorials and samples and instructional videos will be showing flush async.
Yeah, commit is just for when you know it. When you know how to use it.
But if I understand correctly, you call commit, it will not trigger async return on the other side. That's
right.
That will be like people
staring
at the
and it's an advanced feature.
I committed. What the heck is going on? Why the sync doesn't?
Basically, all you're saying is
I think you're really debating the naming. I mean, it's whether it's called commit or not. You can sort of say, write bytes, or it's not even like push bytes to first level, or something like that. Is sort of what it's. Is that I'm done with them. I can write these bytes. I don't care if the reader sees them yet, but I'm allowing the buffering system to have at it in the meantime. But I don't care if the reader sees them.
And that's why they should have different names. So you don't think that you can replace one with the synchronous version and fix your code that doesn't have task. Like you don't have task, there is a sync version of that method, let's call it instead.
So why do we think we want to table the third option? Let the flush
I wasn't saying tabling necessarily.
I mean, this is like a feature for like very high performance scenarios, and we have like people on the phone saying that they want to use it, and this is my scenario, and it doesn't.
Yeah, they were talking about how they like commit, which is what we're describing. Yeah, they're also, and feel free to clarify talking about this third option.
Yeah, it's more like a notify so it's to distinguish between I still have input data to process. I'm flushing. I'm telling you I've committed. I've got data to go through. So it includes the notify of the flush async, but it's not saying you have to process this now, which flush async kind of says. So if you've only got, say you've done enough work for half an TCP packet, but you've got more data coming in, you'd want to go flush notify, but you don't know how much the next stage in the pipeline has got before it's ready to write.
There is a
when a TCP packet's full, for instance.
Primitives like complete and flush and read async. You want to put more and more data through. Like you constantly, if I could, instead of doing that, if I could pass these objects through the pipe to the other side, it would have been so easier. Like if there was a state on flash that I got then when I did read async, and we tried to not do that.
And for simplicity's
sake, yeah. And I feel like this is just another
so let me ask
scenario
you,
where we want.
So flash result on the other side already has two properties.
Yeah.
What would be so more complex if there was a parameter to flash async that says, end of message.
Yeah, but then
at that point you might as well make it state or something.
Yeah, then you make it int, right? And then why not object? Because maybe you want to pass the reference. And why not T? And let's make
keep going. So, all right, why not T?
No, yeah,
difficult to bit blit. Difficult to bit blit. T.
You can make.
Yeah. So
the next stage in the pipeline doesn't know what a T that you're passing into flush is.
Like this
producer would have to agree.
I think we should put it as API on the pipe if only it changes behavior of the pipe itself, not if it just to communicate to the other side of the channel. That's my
but you can definitely see how you have a small amount of side channel information, like just like 2 bits or something like that.
Yeah,
it's all the freaking time, and you're saying set up another pipe and keep them synchronized or whatever.
I mean, another example, a sort of previous precedent for it, that would be the word, would be in StreamWriter, where you have you've got the flush your fallback buffer. There's sort of 2 flushes on it, where you can say you've got to clear out what you've got in your internal buffer. And if you see what I mean.
Yeah, let's. We don't have too much time. We can.
Let's record
it as.
Let's come back to Josh's question. I feel like it's okay. Like if the advanced features, if you get 80% of the benefit and.
No, I totally buy that.
Problem upgrading.
Right here, we're in the middle of it, and if it's adding another parameter with a bool or something simple, and it solves a major case for these guys.
So I think it's fair to have an offline discussion about it. But it's just that,
Let's just mark it, and we can keep going, but let's.
Okay.
I just don't want to forget about it.
So I wrote it up. I'm not entirely sure I completely got the difference between all modes, so I will do my best to write it up, and you can fix it.
There is an issue on Perfect Lab. You can so now let's go back to the reader. Previous slide. Yeah, when reader reads, calls read async, and writer flushes, you get a result object. Result is complete, is cancelled, and buffer. Buffer is data. Is completed is where the writer completed. You have to check both in that if, not to lose last piece of data. So when you can get into a situation where you got data and reader completed. So if you don't check that your buffer is empty, you won't process the last part. So that's our default pattern for now.
What happens if writer completed and you call read async,
it will continue reading with empty buffers and is completed true.
Okay, it doesn't block. It basically immediately.
Yeah, it will return forever. You can go into the and then you call advance. Advance just tells pipe that you can return the memory, reuse the segments, reuse the memory. So that's pretty much the simple use case of pipe.
So I have we talked a bit about this, and I think we improved the APIs. I still think it would be useful to have advanced that takes an int for the cases when I did something with the data and I have an int.
Then you have seek on the writable
I
buffer.
know that I have seek, but you also have seek, and you can just call seek inside this advanced that takes an int.
We don't want to encourage people to force rewalks of the buffer if they can avoid it. So it should be their conscious decision to do that.
I know,
because
but
it's slow.
I read 5 bytes, and now I'm trying to advance by 5.
They can run an extension method. It's very trivial, and it's a speed trap.
I think it's not a speed trap.
It's a performance trap.
I didn't read a lot.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know. Like the same person, but the person read a lot, and it would still put it there.
So if you know that it will be cheap to call seek.
No, but seek is hard to find, and it's like.
I want people to not to seek and not to put ints there, because like you as the consumer of this API, I don't want to make the easiest way the slowest. And advancing with int would be the easiest way, but it will still be slow.
Unless I advanced by multiple of buffer sizes, it's not slow.
But we cannot select what people we give what APIs. We will give everyone the same API, and the person who advanced 80K would still call the int version.
Maybe differently. We have arrays for cases where you have 5 items, and we have a dictionary for people who have thousands.
Yeah, but advanced wouldn't say advanced, but I use this method overload because I have a small int, right? If you have a huge int, you wouldn't know how to.
I won't fight it by myself. I just wanted to point this out that, for people that, I think if somebody is trying to, it's not an expert on pipelines, and it's you guys have been using it in very high performance scenarios. Somebody just wants to basically have a reasonable, producer consumer, trying to wrap your head around resolve buffer and why would I pass it? Basically, I'm looking at the API. In IntelliSense, it says reader.advanced. Okay, awesome. When I was writing, I had an int overload. It was taking an int. Now I'm looking for the same one. It takes a position. I'm like, how the heck do I get position? I read 500 bytes. How do I get a position?
If you did anything with the read-only buffer, you know that there are positions there. Like every operation on read-only buffer takes positions. So you kind of have to know if you can use it.
Because I got read-only buffer and then I wrapped it in a reader and I just read some ints.
And then reader has position. Reader.position.
It has. I'm not saying that it's not doable.
That's what I don't want to do. Give the simplest way that is the least efficient.
What I find somewhat unintuitive is that I have to call advanced at all. Because, basically, if you don't call advanced, by the way, you have to know. There's nothing, I think, in IntelliSense or naming that suggests that every iteration of a loop you're supposed to call that.
Yeah.
It will throw on the next
It will throw, yeah. It can tell you to call advanced.
So you're saying if I call read async twice without calling a vending machine, you blow up?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're not running in a loop that never...
No.
Right.
Okay. And then what does the error message say? You're supposed to call
yeah.
Yeah, you missed a call in advance.
It's pretty descriptive to what it is.
So say it again. If you don't call advanced at all, and you call again, you're gonna get an exception.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to call one of the advanced overloads.
Yeah. You have to finish reading operation that you started.
So why doesn't the reader advance itself? Why do you have to call advance explicitly on reader or result.buffer.end?
It doesn't know how much you consume.
Yeah, it doesn't know how much you consumed.
You might not have read
everything.
Now,
there's an argument. You could say, oh, that's the default, but that leads you into a very interesting trap.
So you need to get a position in the middle for how much you read and then advance by that?
Yeah.
Yes, if you haven't read everything.
Then it seems like an int would be a lot easier.
Until...
If you do a partial read?
Yeah, that's what Christoph's saying.
Yeah, yes. But it depends on how to get to the middle of the data. Like you get read-only buffer, and you don't just index into it. So you cannot for I equals 0 to... Not on read-only buffer. Read-only buffer doesn't have any mixers.
You get the buffer and you say, is single span. Oh yeah, okay, let me get the first span, read 5 bytes, and then say I'm done.
Okay, if you're reading 5 bytes, maybe you don't need 5. Read more. Pipe is like for big buffers because you have to cross segments. If you're reading 5 bytes,
the thing is that people are writing code trying to follow our guidelines or whatever, or making code that is generically, might grow into that. So ideally, he doesn't have to make a trade-off, like write it a different way if I'm writing a toy thing and writing, a different way if I'm writing a big thing. So
let's say you process 30 bytes or whatever and process data in result.buffer. How do you get a position then from that 30 number?
So result.buffer.start.seek 30.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But then there's the question, so that there's no state then. Did you change the name of seek? Or is it still seek?
We're
it's whatever we decide the new name is.
Because having the seek in the advance is a little...
Yeah, it'll be get position. So result.getPosition buffer.start. We can add an overload of get position that takes only int, and offsets the start.
So what may help actually is like some more code for the green part, because when I try to fill in the blanks with the green part, my mental model was also to work so where it's basically like, let's say I'm starting to read, so I expect a header, so I basically say, do I have enough, do I find a colon? No, I don't find a colon, so I don't have enough data yet, so I just skip for the next loop and say, give me more data. And so like the first thing is that I wouldn't find it intuitive that I have to call advance, but let's take that, let's take this for granted. So I spin the next time. So now I find the colon. So now I say, okay, give me a slice from 0 to wherever the colon is. So that's my name. And then I say, okay, do I have data after the colon? No. Great. All right, and then I have to...
well, you don't have to check for data after the colon right then. That's one thing about this pattern.
No, let's say I construct data. Like I have to construct an object. So I expect something to do with it. There's nothing there. So I'm saying, okay, great. Now I have to spin again. So I would say, okay, how much did I just read? Well, I read the name and the colon, so it's like 6 bytes. So basically, my mental model is I would basically, if some condition, I do some parsing, I do advancing, my next thing happens. And so I basically always advance in between. I don't advance at the very end.
So you can advance in between and call every day.
Yeah, but if you do that, then basically your mental model is, let's say you pass a 10 gigabyte JSON file, right? Like all your parsing is
right. I agree.
It's like tiny increments. So you basically always say, 12 bytes, 15 bytes, 30 bytes, and then cumulatively when I'm done and the loop thins around, well then whatever the total was,
that's what we have a reader for, because we have that kind of parsing in Kestrel, and that's what that position property is for. As you progress forward, it tracks it.
So usually when you process read-only buffer, you don't get ints out of it if you're not using like very simple span dot whatever methods. If you process a big chunk of data that's represented by multiple segments, you get read-only buffer and then you slice it, or you use position off, and every of those methods give you something that has position on it. So this only falls off when you say, oh, I just want 5 first bytes, and that's a pretty trivial case that
I don't think it's only for 5 first bytes. It's for the thing that Imo was saying. I incrementally do 5 bytes 5,000 times.
Well, wouldn't you do that with a reader?
Yeah.
Maybe. So I'm not saying that we should remove APIs that use reader and return position. I'm just saying there are some other scenarios,
and you shouldn't advance by 5 bytes if you have more data to read. It's very inefficient.
So if you don't advance, then what do you do?
That's when you don't want
you have to loop inside.
You don't want to pass 5 times 5,000. Ideally, 5 times 5,000 works okay. But, if it gets large enough, it becomes worse.
So if you don't advance and you call another read async, then you get an exception, you said, right?
But you can, if you want to process, if you get a memory that has 5,000 bytes, you just continue looping over it, reading bytes, and then in the end you...
And at the end, the only thing that I have at the end is a very large integer. And then I have to call your method seek, so I can get a position, so I can pass it to advance.
Or you use reader that will give you, instead of doing an efficient way, you give if you do things efficient way and you get a position that's useful and nice. Like you're correct from the standpoint of writing an efficient code, but if you write the code that we intend people to write, they will naturally get into the place where they have position.
So I think at the minimum we should rename the method from advance to advance to, because to me advance implies advance by. Like advanced 10 to me is not advanced to position 10, it's advanced by 10.
Interesting point.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the first thing I looked at. Is like I'm like I don't understand why you want global position. Like it seems unintuitive from I would imagine like a buffer to work, where you just increment it in essentially.
He's saying that reader basically does that, and it's true. Reader is what you just asked for.
No, I'm saying like if you just look at the.
He just wants it renamed.
We're advanced to is fine.
No, but going back to the hint, I do buy that. Basically, if you kind of do one of the prescribed paths that we have, you wrap the buffer in a reader, and then reader kind of has the APIs that I was talking about. Internally, it has an int, and it kind of manages the spans. At the end, you basically call reader.advance.
Whatever, another reader.
Bracket, another reader.
That position.
Which is a bit confusing, but fine. Another reader that position. So that's fair. I buy that. I think it would help people to learn and play with pipelines, at least, if not for some other scenarios. If they didn't have to go through the kind of now how do I get back?
Maybe they have to go through it.
If I don't use the prescribed pattern.
If it leads them to find in reader, it's even better.
Is result or buffer or read-only buffer?
Yeah.
So it's multi-segmented.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyway,
That's why we don't like using a count actually, it's because it's multi-segmented, and that position being passed in includes the segment.
Mm-hmm. But you rarely ever do buffer.add, right? You almost always.
Yeah, we always do consume. We almost always consume to some position.
So then you have to call seek then.
No, usually
we use position off to get where we are, or we slice and we have it. We rarely use seek to get anything. Like if you look at the parser, the first thing we do is we find a new line. We parse start line of the HTTP request. We advance to the position where a new line was.
So there will be multiple advances possibly in the process data and result buffer section. You will be advancing a few times.
No, we set a variable. Usually, if you have to advance multiple times, you define the position consumed variable, and then you set it, and then finally you advance to it. Once. Yeah, and now we can look at the API listing all day we want.
Type the app now in order to advance the slides. Alright, so
first page, yeah. So pipe, read and writer. Read async does what the example showed. Try read is you can continue reading synchronously if somebody committed or flashed more data to you.
And so try read. When does it return false?
When there is no data anymore.
It's like polling.
And if I previously called read async, can I basically use them together? Can I use, read async a bit and then try read a bit? Do they work together?
Depends on examined. Depends on where you examine to. If you examine to the end, then you're saying I saw everything, and that's not enough. And if you call try read again, it'll nothing new.
Yeah, it will return false.
It will return false.
Okay.
But if you don't examine to the end, you can try read and it will give you data.
Yeah, but in both cases you can use them both.
Yeah. You can interleave. So usually you would do read async and then you start a loop, and then inside the loop you try read again just in case you can continue reading.
Is that second overload for advance the examine parameter? Does that mean things before that I'm done with, I will never care about again?
No, it means on the next read async, we always return what's after consumed. So typically if you call advance and you haven't consumed everything, the next call to read async completes immediately with the stuff that you haven't consumed. in this second call to advance, it's like, okay, I haven't consumed everything, but I've actually looked at everything, is what that's for.
And
so
it was not
Yeah, I looked at
it wasn't enough because I didn't find the delimiter I was looking for
Right,
or whatever.
right.
So on the next
don't
call to
read
read
back,
async, don't return until there's more than I examined.
So can you do an advance on, let's say, a 0 position or the start position, and then say you examine?
Yes, that's common when you don't have enough data to parse.
In fact, this is the default of the first overload, correct? If you pass consumed is buffer.start.
We didn't change to it, but we consider it. Stefan is against it. I think it's fine because that's.
I mean, so I don't like implicitly changing the behavior based on whether or not I've consumed everything or nothing. I think that the advanced consumed should do the same. They should have both, is my opinion. Is that consumed should be examined. So my position, I'll explain my position. The one that Christoph disagrees with and the one that Pavel is like ambivalent about is that my position is advanced with 2 parameters is can do everything the first advance can, and the way it maps is that advanced with 1 parameter is calling advanced with 2 parameters just consumed is also examined.
So you pass the same position.
Yes. So that's the behavior as it stands today. Christoph is suggesting let's change that slightly.
So just to be clear, when you say that, it means that there's nothing in that I care about.
Right.
You know, up to that consumed.
So what I'm saying is the current behavior as it stands today is if consumed is the start position, right? I'm saying that I've examined nothing in that case. And that's weird because that means if you pass start to advance, then read async returns exactly what it did on your last call to read async. Immediately. Which it's very hard to come up with good scenarios where you'd actually want that behavior. Right. There are very few that I could possibly come up with, but I'll admit that they're somewhat contrived. So Christoph is saying, okay, since that's not a real scenario, consuming nothing and examining nothing, let's just special case that to say I've consumed nothing and examined everything. So only call me back again when there's more data available, and this prevents potential accidental, like, infinite loops.
So the only thing I would change in what I agree what you said, except the reason for why I wanted this behavior is not because the alternative doesn't make any sense. The reason for it is, to me, that's the most natural thing. If I kind of like, I got the buffer, I didn't consume anything because I was trying to find what I wanted to consume and it was not there. Right. So I examined everything. I consumed 0. Therefore, don't call me again except you.
I think that summarizes it. But to summarize my position, I agree with everything you said. It's just very weird that examined is always consumed in that one argument overload, except for in this one case when consumed will start.
So maybe examine should always be all of it then.
No,
that's the other argument. Yeah, that's at least less modal.
Sorry, say that again.
So that examined is always buffer.end.
Yeah. So
unless you specifically say you only examine part of it.
Always buffer.end. I prefer that actually over the other.
It's good, right?
Consistent.
Yeah, that's what I want.
No, there's a slight nuance. Right now, if you consumed partial data, if you call just consumed, you call read async, you're called immediately with the data you didn't consume. He's suggesting that if you call consumed with partial data, assume that I've examined everything anyway, and don't finish the next call to read async until there's more data.
Yeah,
which would fix the passing the start one. Yeah. It's a little bit weird if you're just passing and consumed with partial data, and you're not expecting that examined behavior.
I mean, you need to ask a question. Under which circumstances would I not examine everything, like do a partial read, and not be waiting for new data?
If you have 2 parts of the program that take pipe and call read async, like imagine there are 2 parse header, parse start line, and parse header.
This is the contrived scenario as described.
And each of them, or there is like read prefix that is JSON and then read the body that is not JSON. Both of them take pipe reader. So you call read async, you find the end of the JSON part, you advance to that part, so you consume that part. Okay. And now you immediately want to call parse body that has to succeed because you have data. So you don't want to examine everything in the first call. You want to examine whatever you consumed.
Why would you advance at that point then?
Because you just happen to have them in different part of your.
Yeah, it's just about
Yes,
putting
like-
code in different places.
like if you
it's
can-
super contrived, might not even be real. To that point, like I don't think we use that pattern casual.
We do
I don't.
use.
We do, great. So we might. But anyway,
Between headers and message body.
we could certainly work around it. I just don't like the fact that it's modal if we choose that other behavior.
So I think to me the other counter argument for the first one, like if we let's say we have the semantics and say the position is basically examined is basically what's consumed. The problem with that pattern, if you don't want to make it modal, is that the first API is basically buggy.
Yeah.
Like you cannot reliably call the first one.
Yeah.
Which to me kills.
Yeah, if you're ever in a situation where you don't consume anything, then
Yes.
you cannot use that first advanced API.
And that I think
exclusively.
defeats the point, because I think the point of this API is that it's basically
Push data back when you don't have enough.
make it VORI free, maybe less efficient, but it's a VORI less API. Like it reminds me a bit of some of the WinRT APIs that they had, which they had write append file would only ever work if the file already exists or something. Like I mean, basically you cannot call the API reliably, and so that's the same here. Like if it's a convenience API, then it should work in all cases. There are semantics we need to make that happen. I think.
So there certainly are some scenarios where you would write a reader that could get away with only advancing using the first API. Like
It's not very useful, especially considering it's like a simple one and it should be simple to use.
I would say in the simplest scenarios you can get away with calling advanced first API every time without any pitfalls. But you're right, if there's ever a situation where you consume nothing, then you would need to call the second API. Given the current design.
I think examining to the end is not bad.
Which
Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, I think that should be the default.
The only pitfall, and I'm telling you, like if anyone ever ends up using this API outside of us, is that people are going to say, "Oh, I consumed half of it. Why is my next read async not returning?" But
well, examine.
Everything.
So you're saying consume partial? Examine to the end even if I consume partially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you're gonna end up with people being deadlocked.
yeah, that's what I'm saying because they won't see the data.
Yeah, I don't think that's
Then why didn't you consume everything if you could?
Well, because I basically refactored my code so that each read is independent.
Okay,
I'm
but-
reading line by line, correct? So I consume line, I consume line, I consume line, and right before the last line, because I already got all the data, but I consumed, not everything, I loop again, and it never returns. I mean, it's really bad.
Yeah, it's frustrating and not obvious what's going on.
But why didn't you consume data to the very end?
Because I was reading line by line,
You didn't get
and
the
there
last
was one more line. It was already in the buffer, so I got it,
Then why didn't you read it?
because I have a loop.
Yeah,
Then
just
why
do
didn't
the
you loop
loop
over
that
it?
you showed.
The loop that you have in your
Yeah, it's
slides.
simpler to code. Like it's not the
It's
fastest
simpler to
way,
code.
but-
I don't have a loop, and inside the loop I have yet another
Because
loop.
it's managing the slicing for you, right? Like, or it would be if it behaved the way it does today.
You shouldn't do that too. You should read all that you got.
Well, you're telling
I
what
hear
I
you,
should.
but
I
what he's
should.
saying is, like,
I mean, there is a counter argument to every of the ways we write it advanced.
That's true.
And the consumed and examined is too complex for the new people.
So the
Yeah,
only
that's the
argument.
original version,
so
right?
like,
We only had
we didn't have the one argument.
So the only argument that I've heard for the against the consumed, if it's 0, I consumed everything. Otherwise, I consumed whatever I examined whatever I consumed. The only argument is that it's modal.
Yes,
You-
yeah,
you-
that's
you-
the best argument.
It's basically like
There's
such an
also the-
abstract argument. Show me code where the code would be
there's no condition.
I'm fine with that too.
bad.
I
Like
don't.
would a deadlock or something. The only thing that this code would be is maybe inefficient, but it's not like it deadlocks or
Well, I think it's certainly less intuitive to say you consume 0 bytes and you've examined everything, but then you consume 1 byte and now all of a sudden you've only examined 1 byte.
Yes, that's
Yeah, but
the
you
weird
loop,
thing to
but you wrote the code, so you don't need to. I understand that it's not as intuitive. What I'm saying is, you write the loop that he showed in the slide. It always works.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be looping by 1 byte,
Yeah.
but it works. Versus all the other combinations that we discussed, they have a problem with either they deadlock or there's something.
Or they go into
or
infinite
they
loop.
don't work, or
Yeah.
I think the general. Tim is basically saying. I think similar to what Paul was just saying. We basically suggest to kill the API that only takes one argument.
Yeah.
But I would say the benefit of this API is that it's much easier to understand what's going on. I mean, like if you look at like your loop example, you can basically write that loop and get something to work relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Now, yes, it's not efficient, but you have something that works and you can tweak it from there. And like I think the problem is if you present it with this API service, the question is whether you would succeed in like half an hour to get anything to work at all. Like forget about efficiency, just does it work at all? And so I think the question is if we want to make it easier for people to learn the API and like tweak it and get something out of it, I would suggest we keep the one-to-one argument and make it just work in all cases and live with the fact that yes, you can write a loop that will scan byte by byte by byte.
And also I think that, so there's a difference between like true performance traps and like code that is slightly inefficient, you can kind of optimize it.
I think
this is an example where you can optimize the code if you use the other overload. It's not like it's complete disaster because I used the first one.
I agree with you because that's the only behavior that cannot lead into the either infinite loop or deadlock. Yeah. So it's just.
Are you convinced, Ian, or are you still like, I don't like model?
He doesn't like it.
I don't like it, but I'm not gonna. It's not my hill to die on.
Especially it's if it's API intended for the first-time users. That would be the best.
Is what this API is for. Like, I don't think it's for the experts.
Okay, let's go further. Cancel pen and read. We have cancellation token on the read async, but cancellation tokens are not that efficient. You have to create a new cancellation token source if you want to cancel it, and registration is also allocating.
So given that you have cancel pending read, do you need cancellation token?
We had it for the consumers who already have it and don't want to write the... And it's semi-optimized, but
so
in high performance...
Lots of people will just ignore it.
Yeah.
If you have a default parameter and everything's
So I have a question. If cancellation source was an interface, we could have a pattern that is similar to cancellation source and yet not allocate, correct?
No, I don't know.
Because basically what you would do is I assume you have somewhere an int that is your cancellation event.
Yeah,
And basically that's what the cancel pending read mutates and somebody else observing is this int and cancels. So imagine that you would have an interface called iCancellation source.
Okay.
And you would have a method on pipe reader or on pipe to create one of those. You would return an interface, and the implementation of the interface would be still the same type that has this int that I was talking about.
Why? How is it better than just having cancel pending blah?
So I'm not like pushing for it. I was just asking. In my opinion, it has the advantage that it kind of looks like the existing pattern. It's basically a cancellation source, except it's an interface. And given that it's an interface, you can amortize its allocation across all the contexts that you have here.
Sure,
but you don't have to create a new object as you have today with cancellation.
Our pattern is not returning things from classes. It's sticking cancellation token into methods. So it's not the same pattern. Right?
I would like to say that cancel pending read is pretty easy to kind of work with a single cancellation token. Like pretty trivial just to call cancel pending read on register callback. The only thing that's kind of hard, and the reason that we implement it as part of the interface, is like when you might have a trigger that changes from read call to recall. Like it's one thing if it's a trigger for the lifetime of the pipe, and that's pretty easy. You just have a single register. I don't see a reason to change it from just having the method, because if an interface existed that you suggested, you could easily hook to that as well. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I like the way it is with the single method.
It's fine. I just mentioned it because David was asking me.
David wants just I token, I event. Like for everything in the system. For
I don't know how to do it without allocations, but now I just thought about, like, if we had this interface, I think we could make it without allocations. The question is whether it's worth it or not.
If user needs to wire it to a new thing every time, it wouldn't be without allocations anyway. Like if user gets cancellation token, for example, and he doesn't know if it's a new cancellation token, to wire this new interface to his cancellation token, he would need to allocate.
It's true. When you say user, on which side?
Like consumer of pipe reader, he gets some cancellation token, right? From somewhere.
Okay.
And he wants to cancel reader if this cancellation token fires. to marry them together, he would still need to allocate and register. Like, if you know that you would have only one source of information, you can just call cancel pending read. But if the source of information changes every time, you would have to interconnect them some way and allocate most of the time.
Also, just kind of a note, like, this is obvious, like, that cancel pending read is like the one thread safe, or like super safe call from another thread as part of the pipe reader. Everything else kind of needs to be.
Well, that's what I would honestly expect.
Yeah, exactly. It should be obvious.
So we advocate. That's why I said single producer, single consumer. We advocate that read async, try read, advance, and complete our code from the single thread, and even better from the single method thing, like single logical flow. Because when you start using it, it doesn't allow multiple reads. It doesn't allow read after complete. Like, it has so many limits that you better have a one logical flow where it's like, I read, I loop, I complete, and done.
Well, considering that you guys maintain state, I would not expect this to be thread safe anyway. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
it's just we try to use it from the like complete from one point of the application while reader is running the loop in the other, and it didn't really work.
So what happens if I complete with an exception? Where does the exception propagate?
From the other side,
where is it out?
Flush async throws.
Yeah,
so basically, when I call complete, you take the exception and you put it to the other side. And the other side does a write, and it blows up.
Yes. Yeah. And the same with the writer. You put it into complete of the writer. So passing exception from reader to writer is not a very common case.
I was about to say, like, what scenario with that?
Symmetry, mostly.
Well,
I'm not sure. Know about a network failure or something and report it like in your application.
I tried to parse something and it was invalid.
Yeah.
Input.
If you don't care on the other side.
Then you don't subscribe to
if without parsing the data, you cannot continue consuming what writer produces. You can just like, oh, okay, now I stop writing.
Yeah, you can force. Yeah, the reader can force the writer to stop for invalid data. So that's
I guess that's the only. Yeah, that's. But I was just
thinking I would just cancel. But I guess
also the reader can cancel.
Only cancels current operation.
Yeah. You don't have a way to cancel the writer, or you only cancel.
No, we have cancel pending flush.
Right, but that's for the writer to cancel its own flush.
Exactly. So the reader cannot cancel the writer unless you complete with an exception. It's the only way you can.
Or you just complete.
Or you can consume enough data that it
No. Like if you call complete without exception, you will still cancel the writer. You can know if the reader failed or not.
It's just a failure.
What to say? Like if the reader says complete and the writer says to write, the writer doesn't stop, right? The writer will just
flush async would return a flush result that is completed true, but you can continue writing.
So I'm a bit confused.
So write should know it, but you would see that it is completed.
Okay, hold on. So the reader calls complete, and when the writer calls
flush
async, then the writer can ask the flush result whether the reader was done.
Yeah.
Yep. I see. And if the writer doesn't care, then it will just keep writing and nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Should iPipe writer have some sort of write function? Flush and commit.
It implements
get memory?
It implements an output that has get memory.
Okay.
And advance.
So I have a question about the completed events.
Yeah.
Why are they not events?
Because why are they not events? There was a reason. Where we met when we met.
I want to hear it.
So.
I think one reason, like, is convenience, right? Like one callback.
Oh, state. It's state.
Oh yeah,
that's
state.
why they're not
that's why. Yeah.
Because we don't want to.
Because then you need like multiple state objects.
Or you need to capture. We don't want to capture things. Sometimes you want to register a callback without having to allocate a closure.
Well, this is the shape of the callback. You can register any callback you want, right? I mean.
Yeah, but often you want to prevent an allocation and you want the state passed into a callback.
So that's why we're not using the.
That's why we don't use the events.
I'm not sure. On which side what's allocation?
So the problem is you want to register an event. Right?
Yes. The delegate of the
you
event.
want your callback to be called a particular state.
You have to justify not using events.
If you do a normal event,
yes.
The way events work, you can only ever pass in. There's no way for you to pass in an object. Like you basically only pass in the callback.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
without
capturing and
Yeah,
allocating.
if when you register the event, you want to provide state as well without a closure, how do you do it?
Oh, when you register,
Yes.
not when it's getting called.
Of course, yeah. That's why it's a state object, not like an argument.
Oh, and what do you do? Oh, this state
Whatever
is
the callback wants to do.
Fire it back to the callback.
But what happens with the object?
It gets passed into
It's
the
like,
callback.
It's like scheduling. It's like the same thing.
It's like every other state we have in
it's
our.
just a blob that gets passed.
Okay, and what do you do with the state?
You just pass the valuable data in.
So just not that I propose the API, but just to understand the model. You could have an event, an additional method. Here's an object. Pass me when you call the event.
No, but you need it for every event. Like every event would have to have a different its own object.
Why? Can you call this API multiple times?
Yeah.
You can call it 10 times.
Yeah.
With 10 different objects.
Yeah.
And 10 callbacks will be called.
Yeah.
Each with a different object.
Yeah.
Wow.
How do you store because they're trying to avoid people needing capture, which it does exactly that.
No, but I don't see a scenario. Why would I want to ever call it more than once?
That's a good question, but.
Well, I mean, presumably you have to maintain a list now or something, right?
Exactly.
We do array release, array pool with the thing. It's pretty efficient, but it still allocates sometimes, rarely.
Or you could make it a linear list and you only have a pointer.
Presumably, it is. I mean, it's not a single field, which means it's got to probably be a linked list.
It's a pooled array.
It's a pooled array.
But I was going to say that's if your expected count is 1, then there's sort of no point in making it a pooled array.
I kind of agree with that.
But then why do you want an event? Event allows multiple subscribers. Like let's just do.
Well, like I think it's all the. I mean, like, so if you maintain the list today, and if you wouldn't have a state, I think it should just be an event.
Yeah.
Because effectively it's the same thing. Like,
But we want the state for sure.
So if you need a state, then I don't have a solution with an event. And the other thing is like if let's say you don't have multicast, you only have single cast, then again also this method would make more sense because events would always result in like multicast essentially. But yeah.
Well, if you hook up one callback to the event, you kind of.
I think we
potentially multicast.
We have a.
Yeah.
Which is not multicast. It's only potentially multicast.
Yeah. Well.
The object states.
I mean, we have this object state in other places, I forgot, but Steven added a bunch of them to the threading APIs because you end up then you don't want to allocate.
Yeah.
Like it is like if you
becoming
need
a pattern.
Yes, like it's true.
It's becoming a pattern.
Because I mean, most of the time, like I have the same thing like in other areas. Like you want to basically not have a closure. Yeah. That's the only way to avoid a closure. Like I don't know how else you would do it.
But that's I think that's slightly different thing. We often add APIs where the delegate takes more parameters, so we can avoid closure and pass the parameters explicitly.
Right.
I understand that pattern. That's completely sane and blah blah blah.
Right.
This one, not insane. This one is kind of weird. I mean, we don't do that very often.
Why?
What's weird? I'm not sure I understood it. Isn't that what's happening here? We just
we take a parameter and we pass it back to a delegate.
Usually what ends up happening is you have two different places, right? You have the place where you register the event, and it's just a normal event. And there's another place where you instantiate the object, and that's where you're passing the state, and the state establishes with the object.
Not true. Task run takes a delegate with an object state, and you pass a state in. It's really standard.
Stuff that comes in at registration time. You almost always need to pass something.
And any time that you're trying to avoid a closure, and you're like, does the API I'm calling have a state object? Like, that's the question of whether you can avoid the closure or not. Like, it's that simple, oftentimes.
Yeah.
Which method did you just talk about?
Task run or task start new.
Yeah.
Task start new.
Because it's not this one.
It's
fine, but okay.
It's really common.
I know. Well, it's really common in thread start APIs.
Yeah,
because yes, you kind of, you can just continue going on a different thread.
I've seen it in other callback APIs.
I register things. It's not you immediately continue. It's like in case there's an event, that fires later.
Thread pool takes it. Thread pool queue work item, queue user work item.
Yeah. But what will be your proposal to solve the problem?
Yeah.
I don't see any other option than buy a method that takes both.
It doesn't really matter if we can have one or multiple. It will still the same. signature would stay the same.
I mean, one thing that I don't like about this method is it kind of looks like an event. I wonder if it should be called register.
Yeah.
Register completion callback or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, like the on syntax is usually for the thing that triggers.
Yeah, for the thing that. Yeah, if register is.
Well, like
cancellation token has register.
Name, right? So like
Sorry?
Start, task factory start new is the name, right? It doesn't have a register.
Part of its
Like,
yeah.
But for example, in cancellation token we have register callback or just register, something with register. So it will be.
One additional question. So what is the typical scenario? What object would you pass here?
This oftentimes.
And what is this usually?
Like the class where you are.
Yeah, like.
I know, but what is it usually?
Welcome to JavaScript. Nobody knows.
Frame. HTTP frame processor thing.
Yeah, wherever I'm trying to hook, like wherever it is when I'm trying to register a callback, usually I want access to the fields or something.
I mean, you can think of it as a set of parameters that are coming in.
No, I understand what it does. I was just kind of trying to think whether it's the same method. Because if it's the same method that calls this thing and then, calls read async in a loop, you don't need to store the
looking
object.
At things other than scheduling, like timer, in its constructor and stuff, takes object state. Like it's pretty common.
So
anyway, it's okay.
What's the name? What's the name we want for this thing? Like there was a question of whether we wanted to call on writer completed.
Register.
Writer completion callback.
See,
or
to
just
me, this should be a solved problem. I just don't know what the answer is, which is that we've had this problem before. How did we call these things in the other cases, and then we should follow a pattern.
Task.run.
Well,
there's also continuous, but I mean these don't really affect the naming of it.
Stand corrected. Like we have APIs in the framework that actually do have the on syntax and that take continuation. Like for example, task awaiter does it.
Oh yeah.
I guess maybe that is the naming culture that we have.
Yeah, I think it's okay. It's an okay.
All right.
So cancellation token has register. Callback. Delegate end state.
It's just called register?
Yeah, it's called register.
Register, I think, is way too generic unless there's really only one thing it could possibly be because of the name of the class.
Okay, so next, if we...
I would say it's good enough as it is.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
If we went through reader and writer, next thing would be...
Oh, one more question, sorry, about reader and writer. The read result and write result. Can you explain why the is cancelled and is completed cannot be on the writer and reader interface?
So imagine a situation where you... So it's for data atomacy. When you did... for example, you had read async that just returns buffer. You read some data and then you wanted to complete it. So you do pipe.reader.is completed. But completion happens in between where you read data. What happens is somebody writes more data and then completes immediately. So when you read is completed, it's true, and you process the last piece of data and you fall back. So it's to prevent
I'm aware of this issue. Could you update the properties when read returns? So basically, if you got the buffer from the previous read, and there's something going on, you don't update the completed.
So where do you put completed?
You store it in some other field and then you swap them.
When?
When the read async completes.
So you only update is completed when read async completes.
So it's always the value based on the time.
Okay, you just gave me the
why
same.
Do you like that? Why do you like it?
Well, because we already talked about this issue. They gave me some reasons, and I couldn't come up with a solution. Now I'm proposing it.
Okay. But presumably you have a goal.
Exactly. So the reason is, I'm seeing I'm looking at pipe reader, and I found the method read async, and I would like to see, it gives me the thing that I read, but it gives me a read result, and then I have to scroll, find documentation, whatnot, and kind of keep drilling before I get to the readable buffer.
You want the buffer to be the only thing that read async returns? Is that the idea?
There's also is cancel.
And then all the extras are just on the iPad.
So it saves you a field dereference effectively.
But it's not about like the cost of the reference. It's just mental model, correct? Like read methods. Most read methods in the framework return the thing that they read.
Yeah,
return the bar, string that read. It gives you the byte array. It doesn't give you something that gives you byte.
Things where error no is like stored on a thread local variable because there's just this one last little thing that I need. That's sort of what these are, like the crap that you put in that thread local variable, and you're kind of. I don't know what you were proposing, but it sounded a lot like that. We have this thing, we swap it in, and we put it on the outer class.
Why would you do this on a thread local variable? Because it
wouldn't be thread local. It'd be on the IP.
Beyond it's not thread local. It's not as bad.
But it feels that way, and I'll explain why. The reason it feels that way to me is when I call read async and I see properties on a read result, I'm like, oh, those values were probably taken. Were probably taken at the time that the read operation completed, like when read async completed its task. If it's just on the iPipe reader, I'm like, are those current? Like, is that thread safe?
Like I just called writer.complete. Why isn't reader property not updated yet?
To be fair, we could solve that by naming. We could just get last read cancelled, last read completed. Right? I mean, like
but then it won't be useful.
I think it is discoverable with a telesense to find a buffer. You got a result. You look. You start type dot, and there it is, buffer. You're one hop away. So it's really just a question then.
So to be honest, like I think the original thing I looked at made me more uneasy. Like this one, I like more because I like the fact that we have some symmetry. It would still be better if the pipe writer would have a write async method that would return a write result. But I think this one is symmetric enough that it's kind of clear what you're expecting.
Why isn't it right result?
Because you're basically that's not how this works, right? Like you're on an I output, and then you get basically a memory or a span from there, and then you.
Because the async thing is for back pressure, it's actually flash, and you get when
I get it.
Not the other, not. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about flush async and read async, it's really the points that transfer the data to the other side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between iPipe connection and iPipe? Where's one used versus
iPipe connection.
We have the slide. Can you go to the previous slide?
Yeah.
So there is nothing that we ship that will implement pipe collection. But
do we need it?
Yeah.
But
you would want it.
If we can go to the previous.
If I figure out how to do that. Here we go.
No, previous.
Sorry, a moment. Sorry.
There is a nice picture of what is pipe connection. No, even before. This. So often we have situations where we
do full duplex.
Yes.
Full duplex. And while we don't ship anything full duplex, we use it so often. Like
I get it.
Request.body is full duplex. We don't write into the same pipe, but we have two
that are together.
Ends of
treat
different
them
pipes
together, or pass them around together.
It's funny, from a type signature, it looks exactly like both sides of a single duplex, but the wanting a different type.
Yeah, they're very different.
Because different APIs are going to want one and not the other.
But you could create a type called duplex pipe that instead of having reader and writer, it has input and output and gives you connections, correct?
Yeah. You just want it in the DCL is the only thing.
Yeah, I'm saying.
We just want to have this exchange type somewhere.
I'm saying you could have a concrete type called pipe duplex pipe.
Oh, you mean
it creates inside just two pipes and gives you the connections.
It'll be like you have to pass in pipe options for every pipe, and then you want to get pipe objects themselves, not only the ends. It's easier to just implement on something. It's super easy to implement. You always have two pipes. You stuff it on the type, you return it, and it's done. But it's so useful to have in the DCL because that's what we use. That's what we expose most of the time, not just one.
You want a socket that's a pipe? It's an iPipe connection.
So now the name.
Yeah.
The name is kind of. I know we talked about this in the past, and we couldn't come up with anything better. I wonder whether people can want to brainstorm or whatnot.
I can't be called something with duplex in it or something.
I'm okay with it.
What would it be?
A duplex type.
Duplex pipe.
Yeah, I would be okay with
Why isn't it duplex pipe?
But it's only one end of the duplex pipe.
Yeah, of course.
Duplex pipe.
Usually you get one end of a pipe.
But I think that might
small
even be applied. But if you wanted to,
I know, but street isn't. For
duplex
example.
pipe in.
Yeah.
So no, but you see, there's a type called pipe, an iPipe. If I see a type called duplex pipe, I would expect it to be twice as.
You'd expect all four.
You'd expect all four. And it's not.
All right. Duplex pipe.
It's exactly the same
connection.
You just remove. His name is hard.
It is.
So the other concern that I have.
Actually, by the way, by not dropping duplex, you make it. I think I could have guessed at it a whole lot better.
Right.
Like I really that gave me a useful piece of information that allowed me to guess what it was for.
If it was called what?
It was called duplex pipe connection.
I see.
I voted that.
Then
Provider manager. Provider manager.
It's long, but I see the merit behind it.
So my only concern with the connection thing is I pipe, given that it only has a reader and writer, looks like a very stable interface. I'd be very unlikely to want to add to that. Connection starts to sound like something where we eventually find ourselves to say, all right, we have an iPipe connection 2, we have an iPipe connection 3, and then that's the thing where I'm like, well, unless, I mean, this is why I'm generally not a fan of like putting the exchange type proactively into the system, because if we already know what the shape is, but it sounds more like, we expect this to become an exchange type, but we haven't really done that yet. So
we used it, but just not inside the pipelines, systematic pipelines. We used it in Kestrel, for example.
So it does exist?
Yeah.
You never found yourself wanting to expose more data on it?
Not for us, but we use it alongside like a bunch of other things. So.
Well, it can always be put into another
implementation
object, presumably. But the question is just this concept, just having the two-way communication, that's like super useful.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of APIs that will want that.
I think it's okay,
It's
actually.
very rare when you get only one, only one side of the pipe.
I get it.
I don't.
Communicate back.
Like any API.
Whenever you're getting data, you probably want to send something back.
Definitely used that today, and Mark's used it as well in Redis, because if you have TLS, for instance, the TLS becomes an iPipe connection, so you pass your socket into TLS and then that back up to the next thing, so you always exchange like an iPipe connection.
Have you found a desire to put extra crap on it, other things as well, or you know what I'm saying? The concern...
Nothing at all.
What's that?
Because normally the next layer, like the parser, just cares about getting bytes. It doesn't care if it came from a TLS layer or it came from the socket directly or a file for testing.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all things that a file or a socket type could have on it, but I wouldn't start putting file or socket properties on the iPipe connection.
So, after thinking about this name for long enough, what would you call it? You?
I would keep an iPipe connection. Because I'm just tired
I
of
would
names.
go with duplex type connection. Throw a duplex in there.
Yeah, it just makes it more scary.
Sure.
Than it is.
The problem with connection is if it's coming from a file, it doesn't really sound like a connection.
Yeah, I duplex pipe.
But duplex pipe connection is still...
What about iDuplex pipe?
Yeah,
That's another problem, but maybe it's not so bad.
So people on the phone, what would you call it?
iDuplex pipe, I think.
iPipe socket.
You're not on the phone.
Quiet! We've already asked you.
Proxy.
It's Friday, why not?
Why don't we go to this webpage that randomly generates names?
Okay, why don't we go to the next page of the slides?
iDuplex pipe.
So we have 5 minutes over. Like, do we think we should just spend another 25 minutes to go through it, or should we just book it for the next 2 hours that we have and finish it properly?
There is just implementation and options type. If you go to the last slide.
There are like two more types, yeah.
Okay, so then let's
famous last words.
On the name, it might be worth thinking about how it would look with the bit in the middle as well, when you have more than one chunk.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Well, so if you had socket to TLS to decompression to parser to something that does work that goes.
You're referring to iPipe connection?
It can be more than two ends, if you see what I mean. There are other chunks. So that might give a better idea on naming.
I still don't know why you would do this, because basically my understanding was it's similar to IEnumerable, right? Where you just pass around the thing as an iPipe connection, and whether that is actually coming from a compressor or something else, you don't care about on the other side.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, just looking at it as here's one side of the pipe and here's the other side of the pipe. What do we call those? If you're thinking about it, well, actually, it's a whole bunch of segments. It might give you a different feel for a name.
In Kestrel, they call it an adapter, effectively, right? It's like a connection adapter or a stream adapter.
Yeah, this goes down the Spring Framework naming convention, right? With pipeline, provider, factory manager, adapter, pattern, singleton, strategy, I think.
Paradigm.
Yeah, I think honestly the easiest name I can think of is either iDuplex pipe or iPipe connection. The only problem with iDuplex pipe is also that it implies that it's also an iPipe, which it's not, right? So like, I think iPipe connection is probably the best name.
Actually, if I thought of duplex pipe, when I think of something duplex, I think of it as something being cloned twice. So I think of it as having two pipes, which is what it is.
Oh, it's two ends of two pipes.
I get it. Yeah. I get it.
It's half duplex.
So why not use a tuple of two pipes?
Or tuples.
What do you mean? As an exchange type?
Yeah, that's not horrible at all.
Yeah, because like
So here's the thing: if you don't have
item 1 and item 2 is super descriptive as the properties.
Here's the problem: if you don't have iPipe connection or something, or iDuplex pipe as a type in the DCL, people will use iPipe for that exact same purpose because it has the right properties. And
that's true.
And then you end up with passing the wrong thing to the wrong API. So you need this other thing.
Definitely true.
But what now if they start implementing?
Reader.
Exactly.
But now the issue doesn't create another one.
Kind of works with iPipe. It's just
there are two interfaces that are exactly the same. Somebody tries to implement a pipe, and they are like, oh.
As long as they're docked, as long as they're interface up front of them.
Yeah,
okay,
honestly, like, I mean, if the summary text says duplex somewhere in the text, it's probably fine, because you see the immediate intelligence too. Alright, so then, we talked about pipe.
So pipe has reset. iPipe doesn't have reset. So this is the feature of our implementation. It can be resettable. If both sides call complete, you know that they are like, they wrote or read all the data, so you can reset it again, and you can reuse it for the next request.
This is another question I have. So like, okay, I create a pipe. I pass it to a method. I pass the reader to a method that wants an iPipe reader. Can the method basically just take the iPipe reader and cast it back to pipe? Like, is reader and writer returning this?
Yeah, everything returns this. Awaiters, outputs, like everything.
That's implementation thing. That yes, it leaks and it's unfortunate in some sense, but you're screwed, and that's got
Well, we generally don't do this on our side. Like we have
really?
made the mistake a few times. Like my favorite example is MemoryExtension. We returned an array, right? And then people serialized the output, and then we said in some version of the framework, like, wouldn't it be nice if it wouldn't return you an array, but something that implements get enumerator differently so it doesn't allocate? We did that, broke a ton of apps because it serialized the output of enumerable without range. So like, same with other things, we generally wrap other collections with internal types. We don't, you can't actually cast them.
You're just pointing out that compatibility sucks, and that people.
No. It's also the purpose of what it is. Like, if you think what you're getting here is like segregation of concerns, so the reader can't write and the writer can't read, I don't think you will get.
I see what you're saying.
If you care about, I want different properties because I really don't want to see the combination of pipe reader and pipe writer on the same type, because it will be confusing as hell.
I think that's
then you
true.
get that. But like, I mean, I wouldn't.
I also think it does push people in roughly the right directions. You're pointing out when push comes to shove, people do crap.
Well, I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you try to just segregate it so that readers don't write and writers don't read, I don't think you will get that. Like, if somebody is like just
I don't think that's your goal.
Debugger or whatever, like, they will figure out that it's a pipe and then they will just cast it a bit.
Right.
And then
so when
crazy stuff happens.
We did segregate this into two interfaces, I'll say that one of the first things we did in Kestrel was try to pass just the one interface to the side that needs it. And there were a couple places where we were doing some like dodgy stuff, like to abort connections and stuff, and it helped us point that out. Like,
right.
So of course it's up to the user to do things the right way, but
The problem is that if they wanted to fix this issue, it would mean that they need to have one, two.
No, we just hide everything inside the subclass.
No, but that doesn't solve the problem.
I mean, yeah, but
Basically, you're saying you would create an internal class that then is wrapped in a struct. Well, still you can get reader and cast it to a writer because you implemented two interfaces on the same object. And if you implement it on two different objects, then you're paying a cost of having two objects. Like
You're not going to do it.
Yeah.
There's no free lunch. Like if you want to enforce it, like you have to allocate. Like I don't think that's a clean way.
This happens all over the place, and we've given up, and we should continue giving up.
So what about the pipe options? Is it defaulted?
Say that.
Because the listing doesn't show. Oh, I have to pass by.
You have to pass a pool.
Why not use the default?
Because we want people to consciously select the pool.
Really? Why?
Because it's important.
Why?
So you have to make one important determination though. Like if you don't choose for them, they will make a random choice.
Okay, now
you have to be only You have to only basically.
Better that you pick the default, or is it better that they pick random things?
Okay, maybe it came from the perspective of that our pool was pretty bad, the Kestrel's pool that we put into we didn't want people to select it. And now we decided that we would use array pool by default. So I think we can default pool to array pool.
So now you can.
So what I would do is I would add a default property maybe like on pipe options, like called default, and then just have an overload of pipe that basically is the null or just the overload doesn't take it and just default as the default.
Can you explain the parameters to the pipe options constructor? The minimum segment size.
Oh, minimum size high, minimum size low. There is a slide about it.
Oh, we need to rename those.
Yeah, sure. Just give us a name.
Why?
Exactly.
Sure, we can rename it. Let's just
do it
approve
after.
it at the API review, so I don't rename it 5 times. So these are basically thresholds for back pressure.
There was a slide with the back pressure.
And I propose that we just call it something with the word back pressure, because otherwise. What?
So
and threshold.
Just make sure we can do the threshold.
So the pressure starts when you cross maximum size high and ends when you cross maximum size low.
So these are minor things.
But pressure
Ultimately, they need
starts
to be
with
documented properly, and they.
Should this size high always be bigger than size low?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the same. Now, if they're the same, that can lead to thrashing, and by
But
thrashing,
the default is same.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
the
it's just a risk.
The default is absence of back pressure altogether.
So there wouldn't be any.
I think it's too unexpected concept to just throw on people. Like we limited your pipe by 248 randomly, so we don't limit you
What
until
does zero mean? Like
no back pressure.
Does it need to be long?
What is it?
Because it's a linked list of int-sized segments of memory.
So if you
in
want
the
like
end it can
no buffering whatsoever, you just set them both to
In
1.
that case, I would swap.
And that would be like maximum thrashing, which means every write leads to read. There's no like coalescing. But
So the low should be first argument, then high. I would swap the order. I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
To be clear,
so
then,
high gets hit first, though, right? And then low matters.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's okay.
Always supposed to lower going
the
forward.
way it is now, you'll buffer infinitely.
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah,
Well, so what happens if you set the back pressure, both thresholds to 1, and then you call a resize on the writer size? What happens?
What do you mean?
You don't experience back pressure until
Yeah, the pressure is still on it.
Okay, so the first time we ignore back pressure. You can write
more or less. I mean, the first time we have an opportunity to enforce back pressure is flush.
Okay.
So, by the way, given that it looks like we can have a pipe option, a very sane pipe options that's completely determined, it implies that we can have that default for the one up above.
Yeah.
You can declare pipe and you don't have to tell me.
Yeah, and also because when we didn't have a shared pool, you had to dispose it or like free it or something. That's why you had to pass it in. It was like using new pool, then create a pipe.
So now all of this is advanced features.
Yeah.
That we
And what segment size?
So array pool is such a pool that it would give you whatever you ask for. If you ask for 8, it'll give you 8. So when somebody calls pipe.writer.get memory 8, because 8 is exactly how much data he has to write, and if we forward that call to memory pool, it will give us segment of size 8, which is very inefficient. So this is the property that sets the minimum amount of segment size we would ask for. So if you ask for 8, we would still ask memory pool for 2K.
Given that we have one of these and we could always add new properties as we need more options, it feels like a minimum segment size. You could pick something literally statically, like forever, like, you know, no smaller than 256 and call it a day or whatever. What is it? It's okay. You picked 1024.
Yeah.
I mean, well, if you did that, and how much are end users going to care about twiddling with this? I guess is the option.
Not much. Until they get a lot of data.
Workload that I know is smaller. This default is just inefficient.
Yeah. Or if your workload is bigger,
Okay,
this default is
then let's leave it. That's fine.
So what's your concern? Because I mean, like, I would think like if you have performance issues, that would be the kind of thing you would play with, right? If you don't.
I just wanted to make sure that that as long what I was looking for is sometimes we create parameters that we really don't expect, like, you know, somebody in the BCL will pick a number, and realistically, everyone will be happy with that number. That number we could just not have. And if we ever found that we needed it, we would just add it.
It's like copy to.
But if you really believe, hey, depending upon my scenario, it might be big, it might be small. Okay, now it belongs here. And
but that's why I'm saying, to me, this is why I think it's important that we default most of this type, because I think this type, most people would not pick anything. They would just pass in the defaults, and then from there on, given that the constructor is the same pattern, right? It's fine. This type is optional already. Like, you only fill in as much as you care.
Yep.
So I think that's...
In fact, one could argue, though, is this our normal pattern where we dump everything into the constructor and setters?
I want it to be
immutable. I thought we did with options. It's just that
I would not do it.
It would just getters and setters.
So what would you do instead?
Oh, because they want to share the instance between, and they don't want like mutations after construction.
Yes. I mean, there's basically two ways, right? Like, you could have everything have a getter setter and like snapshot it.
That's what normally you think to do.
But to snapshot, they would have to make a copy, which maybe it's okay, but...
Copy of everything, yeah.
Or another thing, you know, like in WPF we freeze.
And for SSL stream, they decide not to allow that because you might reuse like the same option a lot.
Roslyn does this.
It's horrible, but for options, it's not too bad.
The thing that sucks about this is that let's assume there were 8 or 10 or 15.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit.
Well, moreover, there's a problem. We cannot actually as nicely add new properties, as you said. Basically, in the future, let's say you want to add a new property, suddenly
you add a new constructor.
You have to add a new constructor, and
so for SSL stream revamp, they went with this pattern, I believe, and that's because you'd be like newing up a lot of streams, right? In our case, since pipe is resettable, cloning might be more tenable.
It's resettable, but you only reset it in one connection. You can have more connections than that.
It's true.
But what about
freeze? Freeze might be a
freeze is not, it's not the greatest API, but in this particular case, I suspect nobody will ever do anything but create one of those and then keep using pipelines. Like,
yeah.
I just have internal hate to freeze it as bad. It's fine.
Honest,
it's fine.
Like, I wish we would go down more the immutability route. I think it's more usable than freezes.
They solve the problem.
By adding
builder, right? Builder produces like an object that then can't be changed after.
Let's see. So, people on the phone were.
Yeah, Mark, repeat what you said, Tim. Sorry.
So I just said in Kestrel you tend to use like a builder. So you have a builder where you add all your options to it, and then you build that thing, and then it's immutable from there. So like your web host is built up, and then it's locked in place.
Yeah. For this type, pipe options is so corner case type that making a builder for it.
So honestly, if it's corner case, then freezing seems like the best option.
I don't know.
What is the problem?
Well, this isn't so bad either.
Feels.
I mean, if like, no one's going to use it mostly.
So I actually think that, for example, they will use it all the time.
Yeah, every time.
They want that default pool.
Right.
And we do use it all the time.
But it'll be fine. I mean, it's going to be in a shared code path, and we're not going to be newing it up a ton.
Yeah, they might just create one and use it.
Like, how many BCL types do we have that use the freeze pattern? I'm not aware of any, actually. It's only in WPF I've seen.
What do we do for options? We just make them structs, correct?
We know usually what the BCL does is it has mutable types and then we copy it. That's what we do a lot. Or we don't care if you mutate after. That's the other pattern that we have.
It's just more to consider.
Well, you just tell people don't do that.
Right. That's also
and you know, if they do it, and it's probably not that bad, and they get what they get.
But that's not like a supported scenario, obviously.
Yeah, it's not the greatest.
Yeah, this constructor doesn't it doesn't bode well for the future.
Actually, freeze.
Why not?
That.
Every time you add the property, we add more.
I agree with Christoph on that.
Like, right?
No. Most of our APIs either copy or abstract.
No, I mean, like,
and then they get copied automatically for you.
That take option arguments, right? That holds true for any method that takes option arguments. As soon as you add one, you have to basically another overload. Which I don't think is bad because overloads are not that bad in terms of APIs.
But there's no question that the usability of this starts to suck if there. I mean, even now, like I want to change my minimum segment. I have to like comma.
Don't. There are named arguments.
Oh, they got named. I see.
That's the nice thing with option arguments.
They're all defaulted and they're all named. So you cannot use only the ones.
I think the only downside really for us is we have to add another overload. For the user, nothing changes. They just add one more thing and like that's it. I mean,
maybe that's not so bad. Okay, fine. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. So the properties, can we approve the names for the threshold?
Yeah. You need to fix
back pressure start, back pressure.
Back pressure starts.
Sorry, which one do you want to rename? You want to rename maximum size
size high, maximum size low.
To what?
Back pressure starts, back pressure ends.
So low is starts,
high starts.
See, this is
exactly. If we put start first now, then it's not called low, right?
Yeah.
So, maximum. No, sorry, back pressure.
These refer to the size of the buffer.
Yeah, so it's back pressure starts at a higher value than it ends.
And do we validate if you pass around? If you pass.
I mean, if it starts at
maybe
low higher than high.
Starts and ends. Is that what they said?
Yeah, back pressure starts, back pressure ends.
Start must be less than or equal to end.
Start must be greater than or equal to.
Oh, okay.
So you cross the boundary, you get back pressure, then you have to consume more than just to cross.
With high output, yeah.
You were able to avoid.
And so minimum segment size, what you get when you do get memory, that's chunk. The first time you get it, you'll get that many bytes.
You get minimum segment size.
Where's IOutput used other than iPipe writer?
Only on iPipe writer.
Well, in this feature is only used in iPipe writer. The reason for this existence is it existed before in CoreFX Lab because it's a generic interface. Like you can imagine, I want to implement a string builder. So I implement this interface. All extension methods that can write to a pipe, like for example, extension method that writes an int, would also be.
Yeah, it's like I want to dump bytes somewhere, but I don't care where the buffers come from. Just give me buffers and I'll give you.
If the buffers are from pipeline, works. If the buffers are some string builder structure, works. Works for anything that is basically.
It's like discontiguous writable span. Just memory.
It's a sync. It's a sync basically.
So and then why is it returning memory of bytes instead?
Yes, yeah. So that one, we are on the email thread. Yes. I think we already agreed that we will have both, one that returns span, one memory. And the reason for it is, if you in a sync context, you need to get memory. If you're in a sync context, it's more efficient to get span.
Yeah. This has to be when you're async, right?
Yeah. Oh. Okay, we're not talking about synchronization context. So I'm like, how did that come into play?
So if I implement this interface on a string builder, I have inside an array. I really don't want to first cast the array to memory so I can get a span.
I get it.
I want to just return the array as a span.
I have a problem with that. A bit of a problem with having both. That depending on what you call, you can write an efficient code. Like it'll work fine on string builder, right? Calling get memory. But then get memory on IOutput on pipe, if you call it every time you want to write something, it'll be slow. So the extension methods on IOutput, if you run them on your implementation, that is optimized for returning span. But here they would go through the memory. They would just be slow on IOutput.
No, the extension methods, if they are synchronous, they would use the span one.
But exactly. So for IOutput, to be efficient, you have to cache the span using buffer writer.
Right.
And if you give people an extension methods on IOutput, they would use them.
He just doesn't like that the extension methods exist on
IOutput. So we have
because we'll be implementing it and it won't be fast.
We have another primitive called output writer that takes IOutput, gets a span from it, stores it on the stack, and you can efficiently append to it without recreating either span or memory.
Okay.
What do you mean? My understanding was that what Christopher was saying that we have two methods on IOutput.
Yeah. I'm saying.
You like that or no?
Because then everyone would implement it, and then you have get memory, even though you want to use get span, essentially, right?
No, it would be the extension methods would be calling get span, right?
Yeah.
And for your string builder IOutput thing, then those extension methods are great. But what he's saying is for pipelines, get span is just as slow as get memory. That's all he's saying. He's not saying, am I correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no problem. It's as slow.
Right. So that's not a problem with having the two methods per se. It's the problem with because two methods will cause people to write extension methods, will cause people to call extension methods.
And we have a primitive that optimizes wherever your memory comes from. It gets a span only once, and then it's very efficient.
So the problem with the primitive is that it's a ByRef struct, and we cannot have a string builder be a ByRef struct.
Yeah, but you can wrap a string builder into ByRef struct.
No.
Yes.
I don't want to do it. I have a user who doesn't care about ByRef types.
Then why?
They're super inconvenient to use. They just want to have a string builder.
Then add method on string builder. String builder.append. Why do you want an extension method on IOutput?
Because I don't want to implement. So you said writing an int, but it's all about any transformations that write to our outputs. Right. I don't want to re-implement them 25 times over on text writer, on string builder, on pipelines. We don't want to have.
Good.
And ByRef types, they actually have this problem that they cannot inherit from anything. So if you want to have code reuse, the only way to reuse code is to have an extension method or you delegate. That's basically two ways. They cannot inherit.
What I don't want to get is the extension method to IOutput that we won't be using in Kestrel because it's slow.
Sure.
And we would get that. All your methods that you would run against the output,
we
wouldn't use.
Sure, we can put them in the namespace that you're not gonna get them.
No, I'm saying we as a consumer of performance optimized methods would not use them because they are not enough performance optimized.
Sure, yeah.
And I don't think it's good. We would have to re-implement all these methods on top of output writer to only to use them.
No, I don't.
Well, output writer could also implement IOutput more efficiently, right?
I guess.
Which then you could call the extension methods. It's a gotcha still, but then those extension methods are then useful.
It's kind of.
No, it's exactly what. So you're right.
I didn't consider that part.
Yeah.
But it's how do you know to create it to be efficient?
It's a gotcha. It's something you have to know. But
I still understand what the gotcha is because it sounds to me like basically you're saying right now you're going through memory.
Yeah.
We're continuing doing that. So I don't know what the problem is with also adding get span.
I think I can explain it. Basically, the best way to write to pipelines is to use this writer.
Right.
So they basically don't want to have any other way to write to pipelines except for the writer. Because it leads people to do the right thing.
So when you say the writer, which writer is it?
We're going to be reviewing the writer next week.
Which operates
one that implements
takes IOutput.
So it's a fine
gets a span out of it and then sticks things into.
So it's a fine goal. The problem is the writer is a ByRef type, and I just think the goal of forcing every single user of .NET to use a ByRef type to write to things is just not viable.
I don't know if
ByRef types are super annoying. So if you if you're using pipelines and you in scenarios where you really care about perf, it's fine. People will be okay with it. We cannot just do it for the average .NET user dealing with ByRef types.
Because you can't embed it.
So the point though, right, is get span is only useful if it's a ByRef type because otherwise it's just as fast as get memory.
No.
No.
No, I have a type. It stores an array inside.
Yeah.
If I have a method get span, I just wrap the array in span.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's one less method call, except the next one that is missing is 10 times more expensive than the first one. So yes, it's one less method.
Okay, so you're saying
10% of the cost.
Memory.getSpan is way less efficient.
Oh yeah.
Getting it from array.
Because then you have the pattern matching.
Array like wrapping an array in a span, like Ason did some performance improvements. In a lot of cases, it kind of like disappears. Yeah.
And I would generally say, like, I mean, it seems to me the root cause of the gotcha is the difference between span and memory, which is inherent to the entire design space. Like, I mean, we basically ask people to basically choose the right one for their scenario, right? Like that's what it is.
For what I was trying to explain, I don't hate the IOutput extension methods from what I've heard so far.
People wouldn't know. Faster, you have to wrap IOutput into something that would make getSpan faster, so extension methods that are using getSpan are faster.
Yeah, that's the main complaint, is to get good performance out of these extension methods, you have to take our first IOutput, which is the buffer writer, or the writable buffer, and then wrap it with the buffer writer that also implements IOutput, but then can do it more efficiently, because it's a biref type.
So we could, at the risk of suggesting something that I don't like, we could have two interfaces, like span output and memory output.
Interesting. So then we would write our extension methods for the span output, which would be faster, and there'd be one way to get that from pipeline.
And you can implement both. And
you can implement both if you want, yeah.
Well, if you implement both, you end up with do you end up with, no, you cannot. Because then
advances the name.
But advance is the same.
I mean, you could make it work with explicit.
No. Why do you want different name? You want the same implementation of advance. Implementation wouldn't differ.
You can make it work. It's just a little weird.
You will never be able to implement both of these methods.
Yeah, you can with explicit interface as long as they do the same thing.
No, because we don't even want the cast to the interface. We only use it as a constraint. So you don't ever implement these interfaces explicitly.
As a constraint?
Well, you could also implement it not explicitly. But it would be really ugly because you'd have three implementations of the same.
Very bad. Yeah. So we could add it and then you implement either this or that. But I don't know. I think that we can lead, like, people who use pipelines, they will have to know a lot of stuff about calculate performance code. Like stumbling on some extension methods in some namespace, I don't think that's like the biggest problem.
Okay. If we need to ask Fowler for the ultimate, but we care
for the ASP.NET position.
Yeah, but we care about hidden get memory. Without get memory, we are not having it at all.
Also, but I do want to ask you one more question about why do you need memory? So I understand the async problem, but we added memory because in some contexts, like there's nothing else. You just have the payload or the buffer, and it has to be represented by memory if you want to survive async await. In this case, why would you not survive async await with IOutput? So basically, before async await, you get a span, you do whatever you need to do, and if you have
Oh, we don't do. We pass it to stream dot. Like we're writing a method that's called copy from stream.
Yeah, await stream read async, right? Like the parameter gets passed in like before the actual IO operation.
You pass basically because we have APIs directly on stream that take memory.
Well,
we can just
you have APIs that are asynchronous.
No. But what I was saying, imagine that there was an API on stream that takes IOutput. It would be fine if it's a return span.
Right, because there's APIs that are asynchronous that take memory, and that's what we need.
Yeah.
That's why. Now, if we replaced all the ones that took memory to take IOutput, then perhaps.
Like we want to write adapter to like SSL stream.
Also, like if we need to get an array out of the memory or something because we know it's there, like
you want to interrupt with existing APIs that take memory. That's basically the reason.
Yeah. If everything was IOutput.
And we're not gonna change stream to take IOutput, but
why not?
Not yet.
So what's the conclusion for IOutput then?
I think it's
to both of them.
IOutput is like memory, almost.
It just gives
It's
you
like a
memory.
memory with index.
It's like way more flexible than memory.
Because
It's a
basic,
position.
because memory is a factory for spans, and I output, if we add a method getSpan, is a factory for spans. The only additional thing that they have is this advance, which is like an indexer.
Mm-hmm. You know what it is?
Index.
It's a position you can write to.
Maybe we should just implement IOutput on memory.
On position.
I output on memory. What if somebody calls get memory with bigger size than it is? Just throws?
I mean, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of memory. It would throw.
Man, we've come full circle.
Have you done the last 2 years? Well, there's a lot of exceptions.
Alright, anyway, it's cool. This is all pipelines, correct?
Yeah. Those are like write async methods are just writing the thing and flushing the pipe.
Yeah.
It's just for people who write the first time they ever see pipe, so they can do pipe that write async, await that, and they're golden.
Those are just helpers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alright.
Yay!
I will send the notes and. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Went really good.